Have you ever woken up from a vivid dream and wondered what it meant? Imagine a time when dreams weren't just random thoughts, but a powerful language from the gods or a glimpse into the future. We're diving deep into historical dream interpretation to reveal how our ancestors deciphered these mysterious nocturnal messages, and what it tells us about their understanding of the human mind. Dreams have always held a strange power over us. Since the earliest days, people have wondered what it means when the mind spins its secret pictures in the dark. Were dreams simple tricks of the sleeping brain, or were they messages from the divine, whispers from ancestors, or even glimpses of the future? Tonight, we're going to drift through the long history of dream reading and art that was once so important. It could decide the fate of kings, shape battles, and guide entire civilizations. As we wander through the centuries, let this slow, winding story carry you along like a dream itself. And before we begin, if you enjoy these calm dives into forgotten corners of history, don't forget to subscribe. It helps me keep making these long, relaxing journeys into the past, perfect for falling asleep too. If you want to trace the very first time human beings tried to make sense of their dreams, you have to go far back to the dawn of recorded history, to the hot, dusty plains of Mesopotamia, where the rivers Tigris and Euphrates carved life into the land and gave rise to the world's first great cities. It is here, in the land of Sumer and Akkad, that people pressed their stories into wet clay with a sharpened reed, inventing writing itself. And among the lists of grain and taxes, the names of kings, and the hymns to their gods, we find something surprising: accounts of dreams. Imagine that for a moment. The first scribes crouched over clay tablets, carefully marking not only the deeds of the day, but the fleeting visions of the night. To them, a dream was never just a dream. A dream was a message, and not just from anyone, but from the highest powers they could imagine, the gods themselves. They lived in a world where nothing was random, where every flood, every storm, every crack in the wall was heavy with meaning. And so when the king dreamed, or when a priest dreamed, or even when an ordinary farmer dreamed something strange, it was worth stopping, worth recording, worth passing along in the only way they knew how. Lines of cuneiform pressed into the clay that would outlast them all. The oldest dream we know of belongs to King Dumuzi, a figure who stood at the border between myth and history. In one famous tale, Dumuzi dreamed of his own death, a vision so heavy with dread that it came to pass exactly as he saw it. These were not gentle dreams, not idle musings of the mind, but powerful omens that could turn the course of kingdoms. You can almost picture the scene: the king waking in his palace at dawn, his breath sharp, his skin damp, his eyes troubled, summoning his attendants to bring the dream readers. These men were not simply priests, not just wise elders, but trained interpreters known as Baru. They belonged to a priestly class whose entire purpose was to listen to dreams and divine their meaning. If the king spoke of shadows falling on his throne, of rivers running backward, or of lions roaming through the streets, the Baru would consult their handbooks, enormous collections of dream interpretations compiled over generations. These were practical tools, like the manuals of engineers or doctors, except they dealt with the mysterious architecture of the sleeping mind. Some of these tablets survive today, brittle and broken but still readable. They list dreams in careful order. If a man dreams of eating his own flesh, evil awaits him. If he dreams of drinking clear water, prosperity is near. If he dreams of walking under the moon, the favor of the goddess is upon him. Each entry is a fragment of a much larger worldview, a reminder that to the people of Mesopotamia, sleep was not private. Your dream was never yours. Alone, it was a message delivered through you, something entrusted to your keeping but meant for the community, perhaps even for the gods themselves. Think about how strange and heavy that would feel, to live in a society where your private visions belonged to the city. If you dreamed something ominous, you couldn't simply shrug it off. You would be obliged to tell it, to let others weigh it, to watch the priests set in motion rituals to counteract the doom. A dream could set armies marching. It could bring sacrifices to the temples. It could even dictate whether a king was still fit to rule. And so the scribes dutifully wrote these dreams down, filling libraries with dream reports. The greatest of these was the library of Ashurbanipal, the Assyrian king who ruled centuries later. His collection, unearthed by archaeologists in Nineveh, contained thousands of clay tablets, including vast catalogues of dream omens. It is astonishing to think of it. the first library of dreams, a place where the inner visions of countless people were stored side by side, with epic tales and royal decrees. To wander those shelves would be to walk through the collective sleep of an ancient world. The dream interpreters were not passive. They didn't just listen and nod, they prescribed action. If the king dreamed of disaster, they might order rituals of cleansing. Sacred fires would be lit, animals sacrificed, prayers chanted deep into the night. If the dream warned of attack, scouts might be sent to patrol the borders. If the dream promised victory, armies could be sent forth with confidence. Dreams were treated as intelligence, reports from the gods, the most important kind of intelligence a ruler could have. In this way, the art of dream reading was as crucial as astronomy or medicine. It was a science of the spirit, and like any science, it was carefully recorded, debated, and preserved. One of the most famous dream-related texts from Mesopotamia is the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the world's oldest stories. In it, the hero Gilgamesh is plagued by a series of dreams before meeting his wild companion, Enkidu. His mother interprets these dreams, explaining that they foretell the coming of a powerful friend who will change his life. Later in the story, both Gilgamesh and Enkidu dream ominous dreams before Enkidu's death, and again before Gilgamesh's long, sorrowful journey to seek immortality. These dreams are woven into the fabric of the story, not as decoration, but as vital turning points. The epic itself seems to say, "Pay attention to your dreams, for they carry the weight of destiny." To us, today, it might seem odd that kings and warriors would base their choices on dreams. After all, we live in a time when dreams are considered random firings of the brain, memories tangled up with thoughts and half-forgotten feelings. But in Mesopotamia, a dream had the same authority as a decree from the gods. And when you live in a world of constant uncertainty where floods can erase whole towns, where enemies wade across the desert, where illness can strike without warning, it makes sense that people looked for meaning in the one place they couldn't control, the inner stage of the mind. It is worth remembering that Mesopotamians were not naive. They didn't believe every dream was sacred. They classified them. Some dreams were considered ordinary, caused by food, drink, or physical discomfort. Others were prophetic, believed to come directly from divine sources. The Baru were trained to distinguish between the two, to sift through the noise and find the true signal. This is an important detail, because it shows they weren't simply superstitious. They were observers, analysts, almost like early psychologists in priestly robes. They built their knowledge from centuries of experience, cataloging and comparing, refining their interpretations like a slow, methodical science. Imagine the quiet dignity of this profession. A man sitting in a temple chamber lit by flickering oil lamps, listening as a farmer, trembling, describes his dream of a serpent coiled around his child. The interpreter takes a reed, consults the clay tablets stacked around him, murmurs ancient formulas, and pronounces the meaning. Danger is near, but sacrifices to the water god may avert it. The farmer leaves, still frightened, but with a path forward. That was the power of dream reading, not to erase fear, but to make it manageable, to give it shape and ritual. In a world without modern science or medicine, that sense of order was priceless. And so the first dreams recorded in clay survive as both warnings and comforts. They tell us that even in the earliest civilizations, people refused to treat the inner life as trivial. They believed that what we see behind closed eyes matters, that it belongs to the great story of the human community. To hold one of those cracked tablets today is to feel the breath of an ancient sleeper, to glimpse the night thoughts of a people who lived 5,000 years ago, and to realize that in some ways we are not so different. We still wake with strange images lingering in our minds. We still search for meaning. We may no longer turn to priests or clay tablets, but the urge is the same, to ask, what was that dream trying to tell me? When we move from the lands of Mesopotamia to the sunlit kingdoms of Egypt, the story of dream reading takes on an even stranger and more enchanting shape. For the Egyptians were perhaps the first to treat dreams not only as fleeting visions, but as a vast language, a symbolic code that could be learned, memorized, and applied. They built entire books filled with dream signs, carefully cataloging the things that might appear in sleep and explaining what each of them meant. Imagine the scene thousands of years ago along the banks of the Nile, the air warm and sweet with the smell of papyrus reeds. The river glittering in the sunlight, as priests in linen robes sat in temple libraries, their hands stained with ink, copying down long lists of dream omens. These were not simple notes, but carefully organized manuals known as dream books, and they were treated with the same seriousness as medical texts or religious hymns. The Egyptians believed that sleep was a doorway, a passage into a hidden world where the gods could communicate with humans, and the dream was the message carried back across that threshold. Because of this, a person's dreams were never considered idle or private entertainment. They were understood as revelations that demanded attention, interpretation, and sometimes even ritual action to prevent harm or to secure blessings. The most famous of these collections is known today as the Chester Beatty Papyrus, dating from around 1200 BCE, a fragile roll of writing that has somehow survived the centuries. In its faded lines we can still read the voices of Egyptian dream interpreters who wrote down things like this: "If a man dreams of seeing himself dead, it is good, for it means long life. If a man dreams of eating crocodile flesh, it is good, for it means he will become a great official. If he dreams of drinking warm beer, it is bad, for sickness will follow." Each entry is stark, almost like an equation, dream symbol on one side and interpretation on the other. And together they give us a strange but vivid glimpse into the way Egyptians thought about the boundary between the visible and the invisible world. What is fascinating is how ordinary some of the images are. They are not only about gods or pharaohs, but about daily life, food, animals, simple tasks. This suggests that the Egyptians believed the gods spoke to them in the language of their own familiar world, transforming ordinary images into messages of destiny. You can picture an ancient Egyptian waking from a troubled night, perhaps a farmer who had dreamed of his fields flooded, or his house burning, hurrying to the temple to speak to a priest who would consult one of these dream books and explain what the vision meant. Or perhaps it was a soldier who dreamed of serpents coiling around his shield, or a mother who dreamed of her child being taken away by strange figures. To all of them, the dream was not a meaningless accident, but a sign, and the interpreter was a guide, someone who could take the bewildering images of the night and turn them into a clear path for the day. In this way, dream reading served not only the state and the great temples, but also ordinary people who lived with constant uncertainties. When the Nile would flood, when the harvest would fail, when sickness would strike, no one could be sure, and so the dream was a precious clue, a hint of what lay ahead. For the Egyptians, dreams were also closely connected to the soul. They believed in different aspects of the self, the Ba and the Ka, the soul that could travel, the life force that lingered, and they thought that dreams were moments when these parts of the person moved beyond the body. To sleep was to let the Ba take flight, to wander into realms of gods and spirits, and then return at dawn, carrying back what it had seen. This gave dreams a sacred authority, because if your soul had traveled beyond the ordinary world, then the visions it carried back were glimpses of reality too vast for waking eyes. In this sense, the Egyptians saw dreams almost as maps of the afterlife, rehearsals for the journey every person would one day make into death. It is no coincidence that their dream books often echo the imagery of their funerary texts, the Book of the Dead, filled with serpents, boats, gates, and trials. To dream was to step for a moment into that same hidden geography. Rulers of Egypt, especially the pharaohs, took this very seriously. There are stories of kings who made decisions based on dreams, who ordered temples built because of visions, who even claimed their throne because of a dream sent by a god. One famous tale tells of the dream Stele of Thutmose, for a stone monument that still stands between the paws of the Great Sphinx at Giza. According to the inscription, the young Prince Thutmose once lay down in the shadow of the Sphinx and fell asleep. And in his dream, the great statue itself spoke to him, promising that if he would clear away the sands that buried its body, he would become king. Thutmose did as the dream commanded, and when he rose to the throne, he recorded the story on stone for all to see. Here is a dream, not just as a private omen, but as political proof, a claim to legitimacy carved into eternity. For the Egyptians, this was not strange, but natural. The gods spoke through dreams, and their messages could crown a king. What is especially striking is how systematic the Egyptians were about it. They did not simply wait for dreams to happen, they tried to induce them. There are records of practices known as dream incubation, where people would sleep in temples, hoping to receive a divine vision. They might fast beforehand, or make offerings, or sleep on special ritual beds. In some cases they sought healing dreams, hoping that a god would appear and tell them how to cure an illness. In others they sought guidance, hoping for an answer to a question. It was a deliberate crossing of the threshold, a way of opening the door and inviting the gods to step through. And when the dream came, interpreters stood ready to explain its meaning. The dream books themselves show us something else too, a mixture of hope and fear. For every dream that promised success, there was another that warned of danger. To dream of seeing one's face reflected clearly was good, meaning clarity and strength. To dream of one's teeth falling out was bad, meaning the death of a relative. To dream of embracing the dead could mean protection from beyond, or it could mean illness. These entries read almost like horoscopes, mixing reassurance with warning, and you can imagine how people clung to them, searching for comfort or preparing for hardship. The dream book was a tool for living in an uncertain world, a way of turning the mystery of sleep into a guide for action. What makes all of this so human is how familiar it feels, even across 3,000 years. How many times have we today woken from a vivid dream and wondered what it meant, whether it carried a message or warning? The Egyptians simply gave that wondering a formal structure, a literature, and a ritual life. They believed the gods still spoke, but that their speech was symbolic, wrapped in images, and it was the duty of the wise to interpret them. In this sense, dream reading was both science and poetry, a bridge between the rational desire for rules and the mysterious pull of the unknown. Even today, when we look at the Chester Beatty papyrus and read its simple lines, we are touched by that same mixture of fear and wonder. We see that ancient people dreamed of the same things we do, of food and drink, of family and death, of animals and journeys. Their dreams were not alien but deeply familiar, and their interpretations, though strange at times, show the same longing for meaning. The Egyptians may have lived in a world of pyramids and pharaohs, but when they closed their eyes, their minds filled with images as ordinary and bewildering as ours. And in those images they found a mirror of their world, a mirror polished by the hand of the divine. Perhaps that is the enduring lesson of Egyptian dream reading. To them, sleep was not a retreat from life, but an extension of it, another space where the great drama of existence continued to play out. The dream was not random. It was a page in a book that had been written before you were born, a page that the gods might let you glimpse for a single night before closing it again. To write down that dream, to read its meaning, was to participate in that book, to hold for a moment the threads of fate. And though the papyrus may crumble, and though the priests are long gone, the sense of awe remains, the feeling that when we dream, we are brushing against something larger than ourselves. Something that people on the banks of the Nile once recorded with ink and prayer, believing they were, preserving not only their dreams, but their very conversations with the gods. When we turn our gaze from the common dream books of the Egyptian temples to the lofty courts of the pharaohs, we enter a realm where dreams could quite literally shape empires. For in Egypt the pharaoh was not just a ruler, but a god upon the earth, the living Horus, the son of Ra, and his dreams were thought to be windows, not only into his own soul, but into the fate of the entire kingdom. To dream as a pharaoh was to receive a private audience with the divine, a whisper in the dark that could decide whether armies marched, monuments rose, or dynasties crumbled. Imagine the weight of that, the silence of the palace in the hours before dawn, the Nile waters shimmering faintly in the moonlight, the sleeping body of a king draped in fine linen, while priests and attendants waited outside his chambers. For a royal dream was not a trivial matter to be forgotten with the morning light, but a matter of state, a clue to the will of the gods. The Egyptians believed that their rulers were chosen not only by blood, but by divine favor, and when the gods chose to speak, they often spoke through dreams. Some of these stories survive in stone inscriptions and temple carvings, leaving us faint echoes of nights when visions changed the course of history. One of the most striking examples is the tale of Thutmose, whose story is forever etched on the granite of the dream stele that still stands between the massive paws of the great Sphinx at Giza. The young prince, not yet king, is said to have wandered to the desert plateau and fallen asleep in the shadow of the Sphinx, which at that time was buried chest-deep in sand, its great body hidden, its head alone, gazing over the plateau. In his sleep, the prince dreamed that the Sphinx itself, a god in the shape of a lion with a human face, spoke to him, promising him kingship if he would clear away the sands that smothered it. Thutmose obeyed, and when he became pharaoh, he had the story carved into stone, a permanent testimony to the dream that crowned him. Imagine standing there as the workers scraped away the desert drifts, revealing the body of the monument, and the young pharaoh, watching with a quiet certainty, knowing that every stroke of the shovel was fulfilling a promise made in the secret world of dreams. To his people, this was no mere coincidence, but proof that the gods had chosen him. Proof written not only in sand and stone, but in the invisible script of sleep. Stories like this remind us how porous the line was between the seen and the unseen in Egypt. Dreams were not vague inner fancies, but real events, conversations with beings who had power over life and death. When a pharaoh dreamed, the entire court paid attention, for the vision of one man could ripple outward to touch thousands. If he dreamed of famine, preparations would be made. If he dreamed of victory, the generals would sharpen their swords. Sometimes these dreams were recorded on papyri, sometimes they were acted out in ritual, and sometimes, as with Thutmose, they were chiseled into monuments to stand for millennia. The power of a dream in royal life is also echoed in the story of Amenhotep II, who is said to have claimed divine guidance through visions that confirmed his strength and right to rule. We cannot know the exact content of these dreams, but inscriptions hint that his victories in battle and his prowess with the bow were framed as the fulfillment of divine messages. In this way, dreams did not just reflect the private fears or hopes of kings. They became public declarations woven into the official narrative of their reigns. When a pharaoh announced that a god had appeared to him in the night, the people did not doubt it. They celebrated it, for it meant the heavens themselves had bent low to speak to their ruler. It is important to understand that for Egyptians, the pharaoh was not separate from his people. His dreams were their dreams. His fate was their fate. The Nile might flood or fail. The harvest might succeed or falter. The borders might hold or collapse. But in all of these things, the divine voice in the ear of the pharaoh was the ultimate signal. Priests guarded these dreams carefully, interpreting them with the same seriousness as they did the movements of the stars or the entrails of sacrificial animals. To misread a royal dream could be a dangerous error, for it might lead the kingdom astray. And so, entire priestly colleges devoted themselves to the study of these messages, drawing on generations of dream books, omens, and rituals to decode the hidden language of the night. There are also stories in later Egyptian tradition of rulers who dreamed of statues speaking to them, of gods appearing with clear commands, of ancestors delivering warnings. Some tales speak of dreams that revealed the need to build temples at specific sites, often in remote locations, where no one would have thought to build otherwise. The pharaoh would awaken, describe the vision, and the architects would set to work, carving stone and hauling blocks, until a shrine rose on the very spot the dream had chosen. In this way, dreams became blueprints for architecture, invisible designs etched into the minds of kings before they were etched into limestone. What is fascinating about all of this is how seamlessly the Egyptians wove dreams into their political and religious systems. For them, there was no contradiction between ruling an empire and listening to the voice of a dream. In fact, to ignore a dream would have been foolish, perhaps even dangerous. A wise pharaoh was one who listened, who acted upon what was revealed in the silence of the night. And in listening, he reassured his people that the kingdom was in harmony with the gods, that the unseen world still guided the seen. If you close your eyes and picture it, you might imagine a night in Thebes, the great capital, the temples glowing faintly with torchlight, the palace silent, except for the rustle of linen and the distant call of night birds. The pharaoh lies in his chamber, his head resting on a carved ivory headrest, his body scented with oils. Around him are amulets and protective charms, for even a king needed protection in sleep. His breath slows, his eyes flutter, and then he enters the dream world. Perhaps he sees himself walking in a vast desert, where a god approaches in the form of a falcon. Or perhaps he stands before a river of blood, or a field of golden wheat. He wakes at dawn, his heart heavy or light, and immediately the priests are summoned. They listen, they record, they consult the dream books, and then they speak. This is what the gods have said. The pharaoh nods, and decisions are made whether to begin a campaign, whether to build a temple, whether to perform a ritual of appeasement. A single night's vision becomes the seed of actions that will echo for generations. There is something haunting about this, because it reminds us of how fragile history can be, how much it depends on the smallest things. We think of empires as massive, solid, inevitable, yet sometimes they pivot on a dream, a flickering image seen by a man in his sleep. A pharaoh dreamed, and soldiers marched. A pharaoh dreamed, and stone was quarried. A pharaoh dreamed, and a monument rose. Even today we walk through Egypt and marvel at the temples and statues, but behind some of them lies the quiet origin of a dream, a half-remembered vision that someone believed enough to carve into reality. And yet, not all dreams were blessings. Some were dark, filled with warning. There are hints in Egyptian records of pharaohs who dreamed of disasters, of omens, of plague, famine, or rebellion. In such cases, the priests would prescribe rituals to avert the danger, sacrifices to the gods, processions through the streets, days of fasting and prayer. The dream was treated as both a warning and an opportunity, for if the gods had revealed the danger, perhaps they were also offering a chance to prevent it. Thus, even in their darkest dreams, pharaohs could find hope, a way to act against the shadow. As centuries passed and dynasties rose and fell, the belief in the power of royal dreams endured. Each new ruler was expected to be attuned to the divine, to carry the weight of both waking and sleeping messages. And while we cannot know how many dreams were lost, unrecorded, or forgotten, the ones that remain tell us something profound. That in ancient Egypt, sleep was not a private escape, but a public duty, an arena where the fate of nations was played out. In the end, the pharaohs who dreamed empires remind us of the strange power of the human mind to take fragile, fleeting visions and turn them into stone and action. They remind us that behind every monument and every decision, there may lie something as simple and as mysterious as a dream. And as we walk through the ruins of Egypt today, through the broken temples and fallen statues, we might pause to wonder, which of these great stones were first seen in the quiet theater of a sleeping king's mind? Which of these mighty empires were first built, not with hammers and chisels, but with the whisper of a vision in the dark hours of night? If you were alive in the days of the pharaohs, or in the shadow of the Acropolis, you would have known that dreams were not only strange flickers of the mind, but doorways to the divine, and entire temples were built around this belief. These were not mere shrines to leave flowers at, or statues to bow before. They were sanctuaries where the boundary between sleeping and waking, mortal and immortal, was deliberately blurred. In Egypt, dreams were considered a language of the gods, and their temples became centers where priests acted as translators between the ordinary sleeper and the vast unknowable cosmos. Imagine walking barefoot through a temple courtyard at night, oil lamps casting their soft glow on walls painted with stars and falcons, the air heavy with incense. You would be led into a chamber where the priests had already purified themselves with ritual washings, their bodies anointed with oils, their chants weaving through the silence like a tide. Here you would lie down, not on a bed as we think of one, but on a stone platform, maybe covered with woven mats, your head placed toward the east to catch the first light of dawn. You would close your eyes, but you were not expected to simply sleep. You were expected to journey. This practice had a name: incubation. To incubate a dream meant to prepare your mind and body as if you were hosting a guest, not of flesh and blood, but of spirit. Before sleep, you might have to fast, or drink a bitter herbal concoction said to loosen the barriers of the mind. Sometimes music was played softly on flutes, or a priest might sit beside you murmuring prayers until your breathing slowed, as though guiding your descent into the dream. When the dream came, you would believe it was not entirely yours. It was partly gifted by the gods, perhaps by Serapis in Egypt, or by Asclepius in Greece. In these sanctuaries, dream visions were not to be dismissed or laughed off, the way we might shrug at the memory of chasing some absurd dream monster. Here, they were sacred texts delivered in the medium of sleep, and you were the parchment on which they were written. The Greeks, especially, perfected this art in the temples of Asclepius, the god of healing. People suffering from illness, whether of the body or the spirit, would make long pilgrimages to his sanctuaries, sometimes traveling for weeks across rocky paths and sea routes, carrying offerings of honey, bread, or coins. The most famous of these temples was at Epidaurus, a sprawling complex with courtyards, theaters, baths, and the great abaton where the dream rituals took place. Pilgrims would first purify themselves by bathing in sacred water, then offer sacrifices to the god. Only then were they admitted to the inner chamber, the dormitory of dreams. Picture a vast hall filled with sleeping mats, hundreds of people stretched out side by side, their whispered prayers rising up like smoke before the hush of slumber settled in. They were waiting not for ordinary rest, but for a visitation. They hoped Asclepius himself, or one of his sacred snakes, would appear in their dream to touch them, heal them, or give them instructions for a cure. The reports we have from these dreamers read almost like diary entries of miracles. One woman dreamed that the god touched her swollen belly, and in the morning her pain was gone. A blind man dreamed of washing his eyes in a fountain, and when he awoke, he claimed to see some dreams were more cryptic, offering riddles instead of clear answers. A pilgrim might see himself building a boat, only to wake and realize it meant he should prepare for a journey. Another might dream of eating strange fruit, and discover later that the fruit was a symbol of the herbs he needed to seek out. Whether miraculous or mysterious, these dreams were recorded by the temple priests, inscribed on stone tablets, or written onto papyrus scrolls, building a great archive of human visions. The Egyptians, too, left us dream books carved into stone, where specific images were paired with meanings. Dream of drinking cool water. It meant something good was on the horizon. Dream of being bitten by a crocodile. Trouble lay ahead. The temples that held these practices were not just religious spaces, but proto-hospitals, schools of psychology before psychology had a name. Priests acted as doctors, advisors, and therapists, their medicine often being the dream itself. To fall asleep in these temples was to step into a vast experiment that blurred healing, belief, and imagination. Yet it wasn't all solemnity and mysticism. The atmosphere in these dream temples must have been strange, even surreal. Imagine lying down in the great dormitory of Epidaurus, trying to quiet your mind, while the man next to you snores loudly and another tosses restlessly, waiting for a god who may or may not arrive. The smell of incense, the faint rustle of robes as priests walk through the aisles, the nervous coughs of the sicket was a blend of the ordinary and the extraordinary. In the stillness, the line between suggestion and reality thinned. Perhaps a dreamer, already primed by ritual, woke convinced of healing simply because the mind, released of its fear, allowed the body to mend. Was it divine power? Was it placebo? In those days, the question did not matter. To dream in the temple was to touch the divine, and that belief itself had its own kind of magic. Consider, too, the role these temples played in the wider society. They were not hidden cults for a select few, but bustling centers visited by thousands. They offered a kind of communal dreaming, where personal visions became part of a shared narrative. A man's dream of healing could inspire faith in his neighbor. A woman's dream of divine instruction could ripple out into the decisions of her village. These dreams, incubated and interpreted, were not private illusions, but public guidance, shaping choices, healing bodies, even steering politics. Kings and generals sometimes consulted dream temples before campaigns, believing that the gods' whispers in sleep might foretell victory or defeat. The architecture itself seemed designed to encourage the blurring of worlds. In Greece, the abaton was often dark, windowless, a womb-like chamber. In Egypt, temple ceilings were painted with night skies, constellations glittering above, as though you were already lying beneath the heavens. The silence of these chambers was not emptiness, but expectancy. Like the hush before a theater curtain rises, even animals played a role in Asclepian temples. Sacred snakes were allowed to slither through the dormitories, brushing against the dreamers, their touch considered a blessing. To the modern mind, this may sound terrifying, but to the dreamer, half asleep, it may have seemed like the god himself had entered their vision. Dream temples also carried with them a hierarchy of understanding. Ordinary people brought their dreams to priests, who acted as interpreters, but those priests were trained in reading symbols, in linking visions to myths, in recognizing patterns across hundreds of accounts. A dream of a snake was not simply a dream of a snake. Cliff could mean transformation, rebirth, or healing, depending on the context. A dream of flight could signal escape, divine favor, or madness. The priest stood between dreamer and meaning, the way an oracle stands between man and God. In this sense, the dream temple was as much a place of power as of healing. He who controlled the interpretation of dreams controlled the stories people told about themselves and their futures. It is fascinating to think about how much trust was placed in the authority of these dream interpreters. In a world without modern medicine, to be told that your dream of drinking from a golden cup meant recovery was as good as being handed a prescription. But beyond healing, the priests also held sway over matters of fate. Entire families might base decisions on a dream received in the temple. Should a man marry? Should a family risk a sea voyage? Should a farmer plant this crop or that? The gods had spoken, and the dream was their chosen medium. If you visited one of these temples today, you might at first feel you had stepped into a place of superstition, a relic of an unscientific past. But linger long enough, and you might notice how similar it feels to the way we still search for meaning in our sleep. We might not lie down in the Abaton anymore, but we still type our dreams into search engines, or ask friends what they think our visions mean. We still look for patterns, signs, connections. The ancients had ritual and incense. We have psychology and self-help books. The impulse is the same, to believe that the strange, wild theater of our dreams is trying to tell us something about ourselves and the world we inhabit. In truth, the dream temples remind us that humans have always been storytellers of the night. Every dreamer became part of a larger myth, their vision stitched into the fabric of collective belief. For the Egyptians, it was a dialogue with gods who ruled the Nile and the afterlife. For the Greeks, it was communion with a healing deity who walked in shadow and symbol. For us, looking back, these temples are like windows into a time when dreams were not private absurdities, but public revelations. They were places where sleep was sacred, and the simple act of closing your eyes in the right space at the right time could change the course of your life. So if you had lived then, and found yourself weary from sickness or desperate for guidance, you might have gathered your courage, taken your offering, and made the long walk to the temple. You would have stepped into the courtyard, felt the weight of silence, smelled the faint sweetness of incense in the air. You would have lain down in the darkness among strangers, your heart pounding, your mind caught between doubt and hope. And as you drifted off, you would have prayed not for ordinary sleep, but for a dream that could change everything. Because in those ancient halls, dreams were not accidents, they were messages. And to dream in the temple was to converse with the gods themselves. If you picture the ancient world, not in the quiet hush of the temple, but in the noisy courts of kings and the tense chambers of generals, you'll see that dreams were never just private visions. They were political weapons, sacred warnings, and sometimes excuses for decisions too dangerous to claim as one's own. Dreams sat at the intersection of belief and power, and in many cases, entire empires shifted because one ruler closed his eyes and saw something in the night. The story of Joseph in the Hebrew Bible is perhaps the most famous. The shepherd boy sold into slavery who rose to become Pharaoh's advisor because he could read the riddles of dreams. When Pharaoh dreamed of fat cows devoured by thin cows and plump ears of corn swallowed by shriveled ones, none of Egypt's wise men could interpret it. But Joseph explained it plainly. 7 years of abundance would be followed by 7 years of famine. The vision was not just a warning, it was a strategy, and because Pharaoh trusted him, Joseph gained immense power. That dream was more than a story. It became economic policy, it fed a nation, and it shifted the balance of survival for millions of people. You can imagine the tension in a court when such dreams were told. Was it truly divine, or just the imagination of a ruler made uneasy by wine and heavy food? Still, kings could not risk dismissing them. In Babylon, dreams carried so much weight that they became part of the very machinery of governance. The book of Daniel tells how Nebuchadnezzar demanded his wise men not only interpret his troubling dream, but first tell him what the dream was, as proof they had real power. When none could, Daniel stepped forward, revealing both the dream and its meaning that the king's empire was only one in a series, and it would eventually crumble. Imagine hearing that as a ruler, a dream not of reassurance but of the fragility of your throne. Such messages could shake or steady a king, depending on his nature. Some would take them as warnings to act wisely. Others might silence or execute the messenger in an attempt to kill the prophecy itself. But not all rulers feared bad dreams. Some leaned on them like allies. Alexander the Great, the young Macedonian conqueror who swept across Asia, often claimed that his dreams proved he was destined to rule. One story tells of how he dreamed of a satyr dancing before him, and when the word was split phonetically, it became Esse Tyros, Tyre is thine, a promise of victory over the great island city. Another time, before embarking on his conquest of Persia, Alexander supposedly dreamed that a man in strange clothes urged him onward, and the dream was taken as divine confirmation. Whether the dreams were real or embellished afterward by his historians, the power lay in the story. By pointing to his dreams, Alexander painted his campaigns not as the ambition of a mortal man, but as the unfolding of divine destiny. Dreams, in his case, became propaganda. The Romans too had their share of dream politics. Julius Caesar was famously warned by a dream, not his own, but his wife Calpurnius the night before his assassination. She dreamed of holding his bleeding body, and she begged him not to go to the Senate that day. He hesitated, but in the end, he ignored her, and the dream proved true. That story has been told so many times it feels more like theater than history, but it shows how dreams entered the political narrative. They could be remembered, recorded, or even staged, not just as private fears, but as moral lessons for generations to come. What better way to dramatize Caesar's fall than through a prophetic dream? It gave his death a cosmic inevitability, as though the universe itself had whispered of his fate. For rulers, the problem with dreams was always the same. They were open to interpretation. If a king dreamed of a lion, was it a sign of strength or a warning of danger? If he dreamed of fire, was it passion or destruction? The interpreter held the key, and thus the interpreter held power. That is why so many courts employed professional dream readers, priests, magi, oracles, who could bend the meanings toward what the ruler wanted or needed to hear. But sometimes, the dream resisted spin. Consider Herod, the Roman client king of Judea, who, according to Christian tradition, heard of wise men warned in a dream not to return to him, and Joseph himself being told in a dream to flee with Mary and the infant Jesus into Egypt. Whether you believe the story or not, it shows again the potency of the dream as a vehicle for divine politics, shifting events not only in the lives of ordinary people, but in the story of empires and religions. We mustn't forget how often dreams served as battlefield advisors. In the ancient Near East, kings frequently reported visions of gods giving them weapons, armor, or even direct commands on strategy. The Assyrian king Ashurbanipal once claimed that Ishtar, goddess of war, appeared to him in a dream and promised victory, giving him courage to fight on. Soldiers, hearing this, would feel the gods themselves were on their side, and morale soared. Dreams, then, were not just omens, they were tools of command, rallying armies through stories of divine favor. In this way, the line between belief and manipulation blurred, but the effect was the same. Men marched, fought, and died, with visions whispering in their ears. Yet dreams could also be deeply dangerous. Imagine a court where rival factions vied for influence, and suddenly, a king dreamed of betrayal. Who would be accused? Who would be executed? In many dynasties, dreams sparked paranoia. A single vision, reported or twisted, could lead to purges, exiles, even wars. In China, during the Han Dynasty, emperors sometimes announced dreams of dragons or phoenixes as signs of heavenly mandate. But if a dream hinted at rebellion or weakness, the emperor's enemies could seize it as proof he had lost the mandate of heaven. Thus, dreams became political currency, traded and weaponized in the struggle for legitimacy. It is important to see that these rulers were not gullible in the way we might think. Dreams were not seen as random images, but as part of the divine order. The universe spoke in signs through the flight of birds, the entrails of animals, and yes, through the visions of sleep. To ignore a dream was not just foolish, it was sacrilegious. To take it seriously was to show reverence for the gods. In this way, rulers demonstrated both piety and wisdom when they consulted interpreters. Even skeptics had to play along, for fear of appearing arrogant before heaven. If you were a ruler in those days, you might go to bed not in peace but in fear, knowing that whatever your mind conjured in the night could be seized by your court, interpreted, and spread like wildfire through your kingdom. A dream of loss could unsettle your generals. A dream of wealth could embolden your rivals. You might even keep some dreams secret, confiding only in your closest advisors, because to let them out was to risk the machinery of interpretation spinning beyond your control. And yet, the allure was irresistible. A dream could legitimize your boldest move, justify a war, or console a population in despair. A dream could make you not just a ruler but a chosen one. When we look back, it's easy to see these dreams as stories, neat little myths attached to larger-than-life figures. But in their own time, they carried genuine urgency. Imagine the weight of famine pressing down on Egypt when Pharaoh had his dream of the cows. Imagine the looming threat of Persian armies when Alexander dreamed of victory. Imagine the whispers in Rome the night after Calpurnia dreamed of Caesar's death. These were not abstract tales but events that shaped decisions, sometimes life or death decisions, in the highest places of power. So the next time you wake from a dream, whether absurd or terrifying, think for a moment what it would mean if you lived in a world where such visions could crown you, condemn you, or change the fate of nations. For kings and prophets of old, the night was not a refuge from politics. It was its most dangerous battlefield, where gods and men spoke in riddles, and the empire could rise or fall with the flicker of a dream. When we leave the sun-drenched temples of Egypt and the bustling courts of kings and wander into the streets of Rome, we find a society that approached dreams with a mixture of fascination, fear, and intellectual curiosity. A society where the strange visions of sleep were dissected not only by priests and soothsayers, but also by philosophers, scholars, and even politicians who understood that a dream could carry weight in both private and public life. The Romans inherited much from the Greeks: the belief that dreams were messages from the divine, that they could foretell the future or reveal hidden truths, and that trained interpreters could unlock their meanings. But the Romans also added their own meticulous sense of categorization, their obsession with law and order, and a distinctly practical mindset. Where the Greeks had incubated dreams in temples of healing, the Romans recorded them, debated them, and sometimes codified them into treatises. People like Cicero wrote about dreams as a window into the mind, while Artemidorus centuries later would create the most detailed dream manual of the ancient world, the Onera Critica, a text so comprehensive that it remained influential for over a millennium. Imagine walking through Rome in the 1st century, past the Forum, the market stalls, the theaters, and arriving at a small chamber tucked behind a row of houses or near a temple. Inside, a scholar sits hunched over a scroll, quill in hand, as clients whisper their dreams. Some are rich men seeking reassurance about political ventures. Others are merchants worried about trade, soldiers anxious about the next campaign, and some are women and men of ordinary means hoping for guidance on marriage, childbirth, or health. The dream scholar listens carefully, not dismissing the dream as nonsense, but interpreting every detail: the direction of movement, the color of objects, the presence of animals, the timing of events. A serpent might signal treachery, a river prosperity, a flight through the air freedom, or, depending on the context, death. Each image is a sign, a symbol, a letter in the divine alphabet. And in Rome, interpretation is a serious profession. For the scholars, reading could influence decisions of consequence. What makes the Roman approach fascinating is how methodical it became. Artemidorus, for example, collected thousands of dreams, sorting them into categories, from simple domestic concerns to matters of state. He noted how the same dream could have different meanings depending on the dreamer's age, social status, gender, or current circumstances. A dream of losing teeth was ominous for a father, but less so for a soldier. A dream of fire could mean destruction for a homeowner, but passion or ambition for a young politician. In this way, the Romans created a kind of proto-psychology, a sophisticated understanding that dreams are not one-size-fits-all, but deeply personal, reflecting both external forces and internal fears. To the modern reader, it may seem quaint, even superstitious, but to Romans living in the shadow of gods and omens, it was a rational approach to the irrational, a way of making sense of the unknowable. Romans also believed that dreams could serve as warnings or guidance from the dead. Ancestor worship was central to Roman culture, and it was not uncommon for a person to dream of a deceased relative who appeared to provide advice, caution, or approval. Soldiers dreaming of dead comrades might take their visions as reassurance before battle or as a prompt to honor the fallen. Families dreaming of ancestors might adjust household practices, change offerings, or even alter plans of travel or business. In a world without newspapers, statistics, or advanced medicine, dreams were a vital form of intelligence, a way of understanding what might happen tomorrow or next year, and the Romans treated them with the seriousness of law. And yet, dreams were not merely tools for understanding the future. They were also instruments of rhetoric and persuasion. Orators would recount dreams to sway public opinion or to justify actions. A magistrate might claim he was warned by a vision to act against corruption, or a general might assert that his army had been guided by divine dreams to victory. Dreams became part of the theater of power, as essential to public life as speeches, coins, or monuments. The interpretation of a dream could become a social act, a statement of moral or political authority. and a mechanism for legitimizing decisions that might otherwise be contested. Some Romans, particularly the philosophers, took a more analytical approach. Cicero, for instance, was fascinated by the ways dreams could reveal the workings of the human mind. He questioned whether they were purely divine messages or reflections of the dreamer's thoughts and anxieties. Others, like Seneca, offered practical advice on the dangers of placing too much faith in dreams, while still acknowledging their potential to reveal insight. These thinkers wrestled with the tension that persists even today. Are dreams meaningful signs of something beyond us, or merely echoes of the self we already know? The Romans engaged with this question rigorously, recording cases, debating theories, and building a cultural understanding that blended spirituality, psychology, and empirical observation. Roman soldiers often paid special attention to dreams, believing that visions could foretell success or disaster on the battlefield. A legionnaire dreaming of his standard being lowered might see it as a warning of defeat, while a commander dreaming of eagle wings spreading over the camp might take it as a promise of victory. Dream interpretation could affect strategy. When a general shared a vision with trusted officers, they might change plans, adjust formations, or delay attacks based on what had been seen in the night. And because dreams were seen as communication from the gods or ancestors, ignoring them was considered dangerous. Acting upon them wisely was considered prudent and pious. The elite of Rome sometimes used dreams to reinforce their social status. Wealthy citizens would consult scholars and interpreters, carefully recording visions and displaying the results as proof of divine favor. A senator might recount a dream to colleagues, demonstrating that he was chosen or protected by the gods, subtly bolstering his authority. Dreams became social currency, a marker of insight and proximity to the divine. And in this we see a parallel with the pharaohs of Egypt. In both cases, the dream was more than private. It was a bridge between the individual and the larger society, a mechanism by which the hidden world touched the visible. Romans were also concerned with dreams as guides to morality and virtue. Philosophers and moralists suggested that dreams could reveal hidden impulses, temptations, and conflicts within the self. They were mirrors in which the psyche could see its flaws and virtues alike. For a man who dreamed of wrongdoing, the interpretation might serve as a moral warning. For a woman dreaming of caring for others, it might reflect her nurturing qualities or an affirmation of social duty. In this sense, dreams were both divine and deeply human, offering insight into the workings of the mind as well as the will of higher powers. It is easy to forget that the Roman world was volatile, politically and socially. Emperors rose and fell with shocking speed, rebellions flared, and civil wars tore families and cities apart. In such a context, a dream could become a vital tool of survival, guidance, or manipulation. It could reassure the anxious, intimidate rivals, or validate a ruler's choices. Dreams carried the weight of both private reflection and public action, a duality that made them simultaneously comforting and dangerous. If you close your eyes and imagine a night in ancient Rome, picture a wealthy merchant who has just returned from a long journey, a senator who had spent the evening arguing in the forum, and a soldier lying in his tent on the edge of the empire. All three fall asleep, and in their dreams they see images that are vivid, strange, sometimes terrifying. The merchant dreams of ships capsizing. The senator dreams of a lion stalking him through the streets. The soldier dreams of his eagle standard being taken by the wind. They awaken, recount their visions, and each is interpreted according to custom, status, and learned methods. Their dreams influence choices about trade, law, and war, shaping lives and empires alike. And all of it begins in the fragile, mysterious theater of sleep. Even today, when we read the Wanera Critica or letters from Roman dreamers, we are struck by the care and seriousness with which these visions were treated. Dreams were not fleeting or meaningless. They were recorded, debated, and acted upon. They were medicine, prophecy, social instrument, moral guide, and political tool. And through it all, the Romans remind us that the human desire to find meaning in the night is timeless. We may no longer consult temple priests or scholars to interpret our visions, but the impulse is the same: to listen, to understand, and to act upon the messages our sleeping minds deliver. In Rome, dreams were scholarship, governance, morality, and magic all at once. They bridged heaven and earth, body and mind, private and public. They shaped decisions, influenced empires, and offered insight into the most intimate workings of the self. To the Roman, sleep was never a retreat. It was a stage for communication with powers beyond comprehension, and those who learned to read dreams were granted access not only to divine secrets, but to the potential to shape the world. And as we follow their story, we can see how every vision, no matter how strange or fleeting, carried the weight of meaning, the promise of revelation, and the power to change lives in ways both subtle and immense. If we travel forward in time to the Middle Ages, we enter a world in which dreams took on a profoundly spiritual significance, and where the boundary between the divine and the mundane was thinner, more permeable than in any society before or since. In those centuries when Europe was a tapestry of kingdoms, abbeys and monasteries, people believed that dreams could be messages from God, warnings from saints, or glimpses into heaven and hell. And those who claimed to understand these visions, the mystics, the monastic seers, the hermits, were both feared and revered. Imagine walking along a fog-shrouded path to a monastery tucked into a wooded valley. The stone walls rise cold and silent, the only light coming from the small windows high above. Inside, the air smells of incense and damp stone, the soft murmuring of prayers echoing off the walls. In a sparsely furnished chamber, a monk lies in contemplation, eyes closed, heart open, seeking a vision in the dark that might reveal the will of God. Sleep here is not ordinary rest. It is a sacrament, a moment in which the human soul may commune with the divine, and the monk hopes that the angels or saints will deliver a message through the theater of dreams. Medieval dream mysticism was deeply entwined with religion and morality. People did not dream in isolation. Their visions were seen as part of a vast moral and spiritual universe, where the state of the soul, the favor of God, and the presence of demons or angels could all be made visible in symbolic form. To dream of light might mean divine favor. To dream of darkness, temptation, or fire could signal spiritual danger. These were not vague suggestions, but concrete signs demanding reflection, confession, or action. The mystics who interpreted these dreams often led lives of extreme discipline, fasting, prayer, and meditation, for they believed that only through purification and devotion could the human mind recognize and translate the divine language of the night. Pilgrims and nobles alike sought their guidance, bringing accounts of dreams filled with strange symbols, serpents coiled in a garden, stars falling from the sky, rivers turning to blood, and waiting patiently for interpretations that could guide personal behavior, political decisions, or religious practices. Some mystics were women, often cloistered in convents, whose visions were recorded and circulated, earning them reputations as prophets. Hildegard of Bingen, for example, claimed that her dreams were messages from God, visions that contained both spiritual instruction and insight into natural phenomena. She described intricate lights, music, and shapes that revealed the mysteries of creation, the consequences of sin, and sometimes the fates of rulers. These visions were meticulously recorded in her writings, and people came from far and wide to hear her interpretations, trusting that her dreams were not only authentic but divinely inspired. To the faithful, a vision in the sleep of a mystic was a window into a hidden reality, a map of the spiritual terrain that ordinary eyes could not see. The medieval belief in dreams was not purely mystical. It was also practical and psychological. Physicians and scholars sometimes consulted dreams to diagnose illness or anticipate disease. A dream of drinking strange waters could be interpreted as a warning of imbalance in the body. A vision of animals might signify internal conflicts or stresses. Some texts offered guidelines for dreamers themselves, teaching them to keep journals, to note the colors, numbers, and characters in their visions, and to consider how their waking actions might be influenced by these nocturnal messages. Even though these interpretations were framed in religious language, they reveal a sophisticated understanding that dreams reflect both internal states and external possibilities, a blending of the spiritual and the empirical. Monasteries and abbeys became centers not only for prayer but for dream study. Monks and nuns, spending long hours in contemplation and labor, cultivated a heightened sensitivity to the images that came to them in sleep. These dreams were discussed, interpreted, and sometimes used as guidance for the community. A prior might make a decision about land or resources based on a dream a nun might take. Spiritual counsel in the form of visions, and a humble servant might find reassurance or warning. In the symbolic narratives of the night, dreams were deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, guiding everything from moral conduct to governance, and shaping how people understood their place in the world. There were also darker aspects to medieval dream mysticism. Dreams could be seen as windows for demonic influence, and cautionary tales abounded of souls misled by visions that were not of God, but of malevolent forces. Clergy warned that certain images, particularly those that stirred fear, lust, or greed, might be attempts by Satan to corrupt the faithful. In this context, dreams were moral battlegrounds. The human mind could be a vessel for divine messages, or a target for spiritual deception. Mystics spent years in prayer and ritual to learn discernment, developing methods to distinguish between authentic visions and dangerous illusions. They taught their communities to approach dreams with both reverence and caution, to see them as powerful tools but not to accept them blindly. Pilgrimages were often motivated by dreams. A nobleman might dream of a relic that held miraculous power, or a commoner might envision a saint calling them to a particular shrine. Such dreams prompted long journeys across dangerous roads, through forests and rivers, with travelers relying on faith to reach their destinations. Along the way, stories of shared visions spread, reinforcing collective belief in the reality of dreams. The journey itself became a continuation of the dream, a physical enactment of a spiritual message. Communities gathered to discuss visions, compare experiences, and validate interpretations, creating a social network of dream knowledge that intertwined individual experience with communal understanding. Political and military leaders also paid attention to dreams, sometimes seeking the counsel of religious mystics before making decisions. A king or count might consult an abbot about a vision he received, treating it as both divine guidance and political advice. Battles were occasionally postponed or pursued based on dreams of victory or disaster. Alliances were formed or broken according to prophetic messages delivered in the night. In an era where life was uncertain and threats were constant, the guidance of dreams offered a rare sense of direction, a perceived alignment with forces beyond human comprehension. Dreams were treated as part of the chain of causality that linked God, ruler, and people. Even ordinary citizens, whose daily lives were filled with toil and prayer, understood the significance of dreams. A farmer dreaming of a flood might take measures to protect crops. A merchant might see visions of markets or ships that warned of opportunity or loss. Children, too, were sometimes considered to have prophetic dreams, and their visions were carefully observed and recorded. The medieval world was suffused with the sense that sleep was not a passive state, but an active engagement with spiritual reality, a domain where morality, health, and destiny were negotiated. The mystics themselves often described dreams in elaborate imagery, noting colors, light, and movement, sometimes producing what we might today consider fantastical or surreal descriptions. A single dream could contain multiple layers of meaning, with each symbol offering insight into spiritual truth, personal conduct, or worldly events. Interpreters trained in these traditions developed extensive vocabularies and frameworks for understanding dreams, and their writings became reference points for generations of pilgrims and clergy. Dreams were seen as an intellectual, emotional, and spiritual enterprise, demanding attention, analysis, and careful reflection. If we imagine a night in a medieval monastery, the silence is broken only by the distant toll of a bell and the whisper of prayers. A monk lies on a simple pallet, body weary from labor and study, and slowly drifts into a dream. Perhaps he sees angels dancing in a luminous garden, a saint pointing to a distant mountain, or a river turning to fire. Upon waking, he recounts the vision to a senior brother, who interprets it, considers its moral and practical implications, and advises action. Across the monastery, similar visions ripple, each dream connected to the spiritual and social world, influencing behavior, guiding decisions, and reinforcing the pervasive sense that the divine speaks through the night. In retrospect, medieval dream mystics remind us that dreams were more than entertainment or superstition. They were methods of understanding, forms of moral guidance, and instruments of community cohesion. Dreams shaped decisions, both large and small, affected the lives of rulers and commoners alike, and provided a framework through which humans attempted to engage with the invisible forces of the universe. They reveal a culture in which the unconscious was considered a sacred space, where messages from the divine or the moral order were interpreted with care and rigor, and where sleep itself was treated as a bridge between heaven and earth. To step into this world is to recognize how seriously humans have always sought meaning in the fleeting images of night. The Middle Ages may seem distant, dark, or superstitious to us, but the underlying impulse, the desire to understand ourselves, to anticipate the future, and to connect with something greater is timeless. In those monasteries and convents, through fasting, prayer, and meditation, the mystics devoted their lives to listening, to recording, and to interpreting, creating a rich tapestry of knowledge that linked human experience to the divine. Dreams were not ephemeral. They were the threads that wove together morality, health, guidance, and faith. And by understanding how the medieval world treated dreams, we gain insight not only into their culture, but into our own enduring fascination with the hidden landscapes of sleep. As Europe emerged from the darkness of the Middle Ages into the dawn of the Renaissance, the world of dreams began to shift in fascinating ways. No longer purely the domain of mystics or clerics, dreams became subjects of inquiry for philosophers, scientists, and artists alike. The Renaissance was an age of curiosity, of rediscovery of classical texts, of questioning and observing the natural world, and dreams were suddenly seen as bridges not only to the divine, but also to human reason, to creativity, and to the mysteries of the mind. Picture Florence in the late 15th century, the streets alive with merchants, scholars, and painters, the scent of oil paints and wet clay mingling with the aroma of bread from bakeries. In an opulent study filled with manuscripts, candles flickering against walls adorned with sketches of anatomy and celestial charts, a scholar pores over ancient Greek and Roman texts, considering the writings of Artemidorus, Cicero, and Galen, and begins to ask questions no medieval monk would have dared to. What is the nature of a dream? Is it a message from God, a reflection of the mind, or a combination of both? How can we study it without merely praying for interpretation? In this world, dreams were becoming objects of investigation, and those who studied them straddled the line between science, philosophy, and art. In Italy, figures like Marsilio Ficino, the Neoplatonist philosopher and physician, posited that dreams were manifestations of the soul's connection to the cosmos. He believed that the mind could receive impressions from the universe itself, and that dreams could reveal hidden truths about both human nature and the divine order. Imagine sitting with Ficino in his study, listening as he explains how the stars above not only influence the seasons and the tides, but also the inner world of humans, how each dream is a reflection of the soul's alignment with celestial harmonies. In this way, dreaming was no longer merely mystical, it was philosophical, a means of understanding the correspondence between the macrocosm of the universe and the microcosm of the self. Scholars debated endlessly, comparing dreams across individuals, across social classes, even across regions, seeking patterns and laws, as if one could map the architecture of the night mind. Artists too were enthralled by dreams, seeing them as a gateway to creativity and imagination. Leonardo da Vinci, for example, kept meticulous journals, drawing not only the human body, but also sketches inspired by his dreams. He explored the mechanics of vision, the anatomy of the eye, and the way images formed in the mind, suggesting an interest not only in what dreams meant, but in how they were generated. Painters and poets imagined dreamscapes as realms of beauty and terror, combining real and fantastical elements, illustrating the possibility that dreams were a kind of laboratory for the imagination, a space where the mind experimented with shapes, colors, and narratives unconstrained by waking reality. To dream in the Renaissance was to step into a theater of possibilities, where the soul and intellect danced together, where visions could inspire invention, art, and philosophical insight. Medicine also began to engage with dreams in new ways. Physicians like Paracelsus considered them diagnostic tools, not simply for the body but for the mind. They observed that certain dreams accompanied physical illness or emotional distress, and began to see the potential for understanding disease through sleep. One could dream of fire or of being burned, and perhaps that reflected fever or inflammation. One could dream of water flooding a house, reflecting imbalance or fear. In this sense, the Renaissance turned dreams into data points, observations that could inform treatment or counsel, merging the mystical traditions of the ancients with emerging empirical practices. Scholars and doctors debated the line between divine guidance and natural cause, questioning whether dreams were messages from God or the language of the body and mind. The tension between faith and reason defined the era, and dreams became a battleground where both were tested. Philosophers like Giovanni Pico della Mirandola speculated on the power of the human mind to shape its own dreams. If the soul could ascend to higher truths in sleep, then perhaps the individual could cultivate wisdom, virtue, or understanding through conscious attention to dreams. This idea resonates with modern concepts of lucid dreaming, but in the Renaissance, it was framed as a moral and intellectual discipline. The dreamer became both observer and participant, a co-creator of visions that were not random images but messages shaped by personal understanding and the laws of the cosmos. The practice required introspection, study, and reflection, a careful negotiation between night and day, imagination and reason. Yet Renaissance dream philosophers did not reject tradition entirely. They still looked back to the temples of Egypt, the Asclepian incubation chambers, and the Roman dream scholars for guidance. They studied the writings of Artemidorus, adapted the classifications of symbols, and attempted to reconcile them with Christian doctrine. Dreams could still be prophetic, but now they were also intellectual objects, worthy of classification and scrutiny. A vision of a serpent could mean danger, transformation, or even knowledge, depending on context and interpretation. A dream of flight might symbolize spiritual ascent, creative inspiration, or moral freedom. Renaissance thinkers sought to map these symbols, creating systems of understanding that combined inherited wisdom with the innovative spirit of their age. The political and social dimensions of dreams also persisted. Nobles, rulers, and scholars continued to pay attention to visions, seeing them as indicators of personal virtue, divine favor, or potential outcomes of action. In courts across Europe, ambassadors and advisors recorded dreams, interpreting them alongside horoscopes, omens, and reports of unusual events. Decisions about marriage alliances, military campaigns, and governance were sometimes influenced by a dream seen as particularly significant, as if the mind of the dreamer had glimpsed a thread in the vast tapestry of fate. Dreams were part of the discourse of power, blending spirituality, morality, and practical consequence in a way that shaped lives and history alike. The Renaissance also brought a new fascination with the psychological aspects of dreams. Thinkers like Thomas Hobbes, though slightly later, would explore the mechanics of imagination and memory. But in the 15th and 16th centuries, the seeds of inquiry were already being sown. Scholars speculated about the role of the mind, emotions, and sensory experiences in shaping dreams. Nightmares could be traced to anxiety, hope, or desire. Dreams of grandeur could reflect ambition or fear. This intellectual curiosity coexisted with the mystical and prophetic interpretations, creating a rich, layered understanding of dreaming as a human experience that was simultaneously spiritual, moral, intellectual, and emotional. If we imagine a night in Renaissance Florence, it is easy to picture a scholar in his study, a painter in his workshop, a noblewoman in her chamber, all drifting into sleep. Each of them carries the concerns of their waking life: politics, art, commerce, morality, or faith. Yet in sleep, those concerns transform into visions, surreal and symbolic, sometimes terrifying, sometimes illuminating. The scholar dreams of spiraling constellations, revealing the order of the cosmos. The painter sees impossible landscapes filled with fantastic creatures. The noblewoman dreams of saints guiding her in moral dilemmas. Upon waking, they record, interpret, and reflect, integrating the lessons and insights into their daily lives. The Renaissance made dreams both private and public, a personal experience with societal resonance. Ultimately, the Renaissance redefined the human relationship with dreams. They were no longer solely divine messages or omens of fate, but windows into the workings of the human mind and soul. Dreams became laboratories of thought, imagination, and morality, spaces where individuals could explore, question, and create. They were at once mystical and rational, sacred and artistic, personal and political. To dream was to participate in a dialogue with the universe, the divine, and oneself, to glimpse possibilities beyond ordinary perception, and to refine understanding, ethics, and creativity. The Renaissance dream philosophers remind us that curiosity, reason, and imagination can coexist with reverence and faith, and that the human desire to find meaning in the night is as old as civilization itself, shaped and reshaped by every culture that has looked to the stars and the shadows for insight. As the Renaissance gradually gave way to the Enlightenment, the world of dreams underwent another remarkable transformation. No longer were dreams the exclusive domain of mystics, prophets, or philosophers contemplating the cosmos. The Enlightenment, with its relentless focus on reason, observation, and empirical evidence, demanded that everything, even the shadowy realm of sleep, be examined, questioned, and understood. Imagine the bustling cities of 17th and 18th century Europe, Paris, London, Vienna, and Edinburgh, with coffeehouses filled with thinkers debating ideas, laboratories where natural philosophers conducted experiments, and printing presses producing books that circulated knowledge faster than ever before. In this atmosphere, dreams could no longer be taken purely as divine messages, moral guidance, or mystical experiences. They became objects of inquiry, data to be analyzed, patterns to be studied, and windows into the workings of the human mind. Sleep itself was slowly being dissected, understood as a physiological state, and dreams as phenomena that could reveal not only morality and spiritual insight, but the operations of thought, memory, and emotion. During this period, medical writers and philosophers began to pay attention to dreams in a way that combined observation with theory. People like Robert Burton, in his monumental work, The Anatomy of Melancholy, explored dreams as reflections of both body and mind, suggesting that they arose from humors, passions, and the state of the imagination. He described dreams as the mind's theater, where emotions, fears, desires, and memories replayed themselves in strange and sometimes prophetic forms. It was a step away from pure mysticism toward a more analytical approach. Dreams were still mysterious, but they could be observed, recorded, and interpreted systematically. Imagine a gentleman scholar reclining in his chamber, waking from a vivid dream, and carefully noting every detail. The colors, the actions, the people involved, the feelings stirred. This was not idle superstition. It was an early attempt at collecting empirical evidence, a proto-scientific approach to understanding the patterns of the human mind. The Enlightenment also saw the rise of what we might call dream psychology. Thinkers such as John Locke and David Hartley began to speculate that the images of dreams arose from the mind's interaction with experiences, sensations, and memory. Locke suggested that dreams were reflections of waking life, fragments of perception reassembled in sleep. Hartley proposed that vibrations of the nerves created impressions in the brain that became dreams. The mystical and prophetic interpretations of the past were now combined with mechanical and physiological explanations. Dreams were no longer necessarily messages from God. They were phenomena to be studied, analyzed, and perhaps even understood scientifically. Sleep became a laboratory, and dreams were its experiments, revealing the ways in which perception, memory, and imagination combined to produce the visions of the night. Medical treatises of the era also began to focus on the connection between dreams and health. Physicians observed that fever, indigestion, emotional distress, or neurological conditions could influence the content of dreams, and conversely, that vivid dreams could reflect underlying illness. Some suggested that dreams might serve a purpose, helping to discharge anxieties or process experiences, a notion surprisingly close to modern interpretations. People recorded dreams to monitor their health or to seek clues about treatment, and manuals emerged offering guidance on how to interpret dreams as signs of bodily imbalance. The Enlightenment was not content with vague interpretations. It sought patterns, causes, and practical applications, treating dreams as evidence of the intimate connection between body and mind, sensation and thought, physiology and consciousness. In addition to medicine and philosophy, the Enlightenment also brought literary and cultural interest in dreams. Writers and poets explored dreams as a means of imagination, reflection, and moral instruction. The works of Samuel Richardson, Goethe, and others featured dream sequences that illuminated characters' inner lives, revealing hopes, fears, and subconscious desires. Literature became a mirror of the dream world, translating its strangeness into art, psychology, and moral exploration. These dream narratives often carried a dual purpose: to entertain and to instruct, to explore the inner workings of the human mind, while also offering social, moral, or philosophical insight. Dreams were no longer simply private experiences. They were public objects of reflection, dialogue, and expression, bridging imagination, intellect, and emotion. Scientific inquiry in this period also began to explore the mechanics of sleep itself. Physicians such as Thomas Willis and later Erasmus Darwin observed the phases of sleep, the effects of fatigue, and the impact of diet and lifestyle on dreams. Experiments were conducted to determine whether sensory stimulation during sleep could influence dream content, or whether specific mental exercises could enhance or clarify dreams. The notion that dreams could be controlled, observed, and understood marked a radical departure from the medieval and Renaissance approaches, where dreams were largely considered divine or mystical communications. In the Enlightenment, dreams were increasingly seen as phenomena that could be explained through reason, study, and observation, a testament to humanity's growing confidence in its capacity to understand the natural world. Political and social dimensions of dreams persisted as well. Leaders, scholars, and everyday citizens still attached significance to dreams, sometimes using them to justify actions, decisions, or philosophical positions. A diplomat might note a dream that seemed to warn of betrayal. A merchant might take a dream as encouragement to invest or delay. A philosopher might reflect on a dream as evidence of the mind's workings. In the coffee houses of London and Paris, dream stories were recounted alongside news, gossip, and debate, blending entertainment with moral and intellectual reflection. Dreams became part of the discourse of society, illustrating the interconnectedness of individual experience, social expectation, and philosophical speculation. Religious interpretations did not disappear entirely, but they were increasingly filtered through reason. The Enlightenment emphasized balance. While dreams could contain moral or spiritual lessons, they could also be explained by natural causes. This duality created a tension that fascinated thinkers and dreamers alike. Were dreams divine signals, physiological phenomena, or psychological reflections? Could they be both simultaneously? And could the study of dreams reveal truths about human nature that were otherwise inaccessible? These questions animated discourse in salons, lecture halls, and private studies, shaping not only how people understood sleep, but how they understood themselves. The Enlightenment also saw a growing interest in the universality of dreams. Scholars began comparing dream reports across cultures, questioning whether patterns existed across nations, social classes, or ages. They sought to identify recurring symbols, recurring themes, and recurring emotional responses, building a proto-anthropology of dreaming. Such studies suggested that while dreams were influenced by individual experience and culture, there might also be shared elements of the human psyche that transcended circumstance, a notion that resonates with modern theories of archetypes and collective unconscious. Dreams were no longer isolated experiences. They were data points in the grand experiment of human understanding. Consider a night in Paris, 1750. A merchant dreams of ships sailing into a storm. A philosopher dreams of falling from a high tower. A young woman dreams of speaking to a figure of authority she fears in waking life. Each of these dreams is analyzed, not merely as a mystical sign, but as a reflection of personal experience, physical state, and social context. Notes are taken, letters exchanged, and discussions held in coffee houses and salons. Dreams are observed, interpreted, and debated, becoming part of a collective attempt to understand both human nature and the wider universe. Sleep becomes a laboratory, the mind an instrument, and dreams the raw material for inquiry, imagination, and reflection. By the late 18th century, the Enlightenment had laid the groundwork for the modern understanding of dreams. It established the principles of observation, recording, and analysis. It combined physiological, psychological, and social perspectives. It recognized the interplay of emotion, memory, and perception, and it maintained an enduring fascination with the symbolic, the moral, and the philosophical dimensions of dreaming. The era's thinkers acknowledged that while dreams could never be fully controlled or entirely predicted, they could be studied, understood, and appreciated as windows into the hidden workings of the human mind and the mysteries of the self. Dreams in the Enlightenment were thus at once empirical and imaginative, private and social, mysterious and rational. They reflected personal fears, desires, and hopes, while also offering insight into universal patterns of human thought and emotion. They were a bridge between the waking and sleeping mind, between body and soul, between science and philosophy, and between the individual and society. To study dreams was to engage with the deepest questions of existence. How does the mind work? What is the nature of consciousness? What is the relationship between imagination and reality? And how can humans navigate a complex, uncertain world guided by the sometimes cryptic messages of the night? As we reflect on the Enlightenment, we see that it transformed dreams from mystical curiosities into subjects of systematic inquiry, creating a foundation for modern psychology, neuroscience, and literary imagination. The fascination with dreams did not disappear. It intensified, evolving into scientific, philosophical, and artistic exploration. Dreams were no longer simply warnings or divine messages. They were phenomena to observe, interpret, and understand. They were laboratories of the mind, stages for imagination, and guides for ethical and social reflection. The Enlightenment made the study of dreams a serious intellectual pursuit, blending curiosity, reason, and reverence for the complexity of human experience. To imagine a person in the Enlightenment waking from a vivid dream is to picture a mind ready to question, record, and analyze, eager to connect the insights of the night to the concerns of the day. Dreams became data, art, moral reflection, and philosophical meditation all at once, and in doing so they reaffirmed a timeless truth that human beings have always sought meaning in the shadows of sleep, striving to understand the hidden architecture of their minds and the secrets of the world around them, and that every age has redefined the importance, purpose, and power of dreams in ways that illuminate both the past and the timeless human desire to explore the unknown. As the Enlightenment gradually receded and Europe moved into the late 18th and early 19th centuries, a new approach to dreams emerged, one that emphasized emotion, imagination, and the transcendent qualities of the human spirit. The Romantic era, with its sweeping landscapes, towering mountains, and windswept coasts, celebrated the individual's inner life, and dreams became central to understanding human emotion, creativity, and the sublime, whereas the previous age had dissected dreams, sought to observe and analyze them. The Romantics were captivated by their mystery, their intensity, and their ability to reveal the profound truths of the soul. Picture a quiet room in early 19th century Germany, a candle flickering against the wall, the rain tapping softly on a window. A young poet lies awake, then drifts into sleep, and suddenly the mind is flooded with images that defy logic. Vast forests that stretch beyond comprehension, rivers of light, faces of loved ones long gone, and landscapes that shift from serenity to terror in the blink of an eye. To the romantic sensibility, these visions are not meaningless. They are the language of the soul, poetic expressions of the self and the universe, portals through which the imagination communes with the infinite. For romantic thinkers, dreams were more than private experiences. They were central to artistic creation and philosophical reflection. Writers and poets like William Blake, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, Novalis, and Edgar Allan Poe explored dreams as sources of inspiration, seeing in them metaphors for emotion, moral conflict, and the ineffable mysteries of existence. Coleridge, for instance, described the opium-induced dream that became the famous fragment of Kubla Khan, emphasizing how the dream produced images that were vivid, symbolic, and emotionally charged. Dreams, in the Romantic view, were laboratories of imagination, testing grounds where the mind could transcend the limitations of waking experience. Artists and poets recorded dreams meticulously, sometimes reconstructing them in verse, in paintings, or in narrative, preserving the raw, often chaotic intensity of the nocturnal vision. In this era, dreams were not analyzed for moral instruction or scientific cause alone. They were celebrated for their beauty, their terror, and their ability to evoke the sublime. The sublime, a concept central to Romantic thought, found its truest expression in the dream. Sublimity arises when the mind confronts the vast, the powerful, the incomprehensible, and dreams often presented just such experiences. A dream of a towering cliff, a violent storm, or a luminous night sky could fill the dreamer with awe, terror, and wonder simultaneously. The Romantic mind understood that these dreams revealed truths about human emotion and perception, about the ways in which the soul experiences magnitude, danger, beauty, and transcendence. Dreams became a vehicle for exploring the ineffable, a means of connecting personal experience to universal themes, and a mirror in which the depths of the human spirit could be glimpsed. Where the Enlightenment had sought patterns and causes, the Romantics were attentive to feeling. Dreams were analyzed not for their logical structure, but for the intensity, passion, and nuance of the experience. A dream of falling might evoke fear, loss, or humility. A dream of soaring through the sky might evoke freedom, ecstasy, or longing. A dream of conversing with a deceased loved one might evoke grief, consolation, or moral reflection. In the Romantic worldview, these emotional responses were themselves meaningful, offering insight into the character, desires, and psyche of the dreamer. The The dream was a mirror not only of hidden truths, but of immediate emotional reality, a reflection of how the soul interacts with the world and with itself. Dreams also served as a critique of society, a way to imagine worlds beyond the limitations of the material and the mundane. In romantic literature, dreams could transport the dreamer into idealized landscapes, into encounters with mythic figures, or into confrontations with the shadow aspects of the self. Novalis, for example, treated dreams as spaces where philosophical and poetic inquiry merged, where the dreamer could explore moral questions, emotional depth, and spiritual longing without the constraints of social convention. Dreams allowed a glimpse of freedom of thought, imagination, and moral reflection, creating possibilities for insight and creativity that waking life might suppress. The romantic fascination with dreams was intertwined with the rise of individualism. Each dreamer's vision was unique, reflecting personal experience, imagination, and emotion. Whereas previous eras often emphasized universal symbols, social norms, or physiological causes, the Romantics valued the singularity of each dream. A peasant, a noblewoman, a poet, or a soldier, each dream was valid in its particularity, offering a window into the individual soul. This democratization of dreaming, the recognition that every mind produces visions worth noting, connected with broader romantic ideals of personal freedom, introspection, and authenticity. To dream was to access the inner self, to confront desires, fears, and aspirations, and to participate in the ongoing exploration of what it means to be human. Dreams during this era also reflected the changing understanding of the subconscious, even before the term existed. Romantics recognized that dreams were shaped by memory, imagination, and emotion, and they speculated about the interplay between conscious and unconscious experience. Nightmares were not simply warnings or divine punishments, but explorations of repressed fears, social anxieties, or unacknowledged desires. Sweet dreams, on the other hand, revealed longing, hope, and aspiration. By attending to these visions, romantic thinkers sought to reconcile the contradictions within the self, to navigate the terrain of human emotion, and to uncover truths about the nature of existence that waking reason alone could not provide. Dreams were simultaneously internal and external, private and universal, chaotic and revealing, offering access to dimensions of experience that had previously been ignored or dismissed. The artistic and literary culture of the time encouraged meticulous recording of dreams. Diaries, journals, and letters became repositories of nocturnal visions, preserving the intensity, symbolism, and emotional resonance for reflection or creative use. Dream imagery inspired visual art, poetry, and narrative fiction, influencing both subject matter and aesthetic style. Painters might depict dream landscapes in surreal or fantastical ways. Poets might translate fleeting visions into rich, evocative language. Novelists might reconstruct dreams to illuminate character psychology. This careful documentation not only enriched artistic creation, but also provided material for philosophical reflection, as thinkers considered how these visions reflected emotion, morality, and the human condition. Dreams became both raw material and mirror, offering insight and inspiration simultaneously. In addition to personal and artistic exploration, Romantic thinkers also considered dreams in the context of morality, spirituality, and human aspiration. A vision of a saint, a heroic figure, or a moral struggle could illuminate ethical dilemmas, inspire self-reflection, or provide guidance for action. Dreams were treated as spaces where moral imagination could be exercised, where virtue and vice could be contemplated, and where the human spirit could grapple with both ideals and fears. The dreamer's responsibility was not simply to record or observe, but to interpret and integrate these visions, understanding them as reflections of both personal and universal experience. Dreams became moral as well as emotional laboratories, spaces in which the inner and outer worlds intersected. Political and social dimensions remained present as well. Leaders, thinkers, and writers sometimes used dreams to convey messages, assert authority, or explore alternative possibilities. A vision of a future revolution, a symbolic landscape, or a prophetic image could be recorded, interpreted, and disseminated, influencing opinion, guiding reflection, or inspiring action. While the mystical authority of the medieval period had diminished, the symbolic power of dreams remained potent, shaping imagination, discourse, and creativity across society. Dreams were simultaneously personal and cultural, reflecting individual experience while resonating with broader social, moral, and artistic concerns. If we imagine a night in the Romantic era, the mind can picture a young poet lying in a candlelit room, a noblewoman reflecting on her life, a painter preparing his easel, and a philosopher writing by lamplight, all drifting into sleep. Each experiences a vision unique to their imagination, experience, and emotional state. Perhaps the poet dreams of a vast, mist-shrouded mountain, of a river that flows through both heaven and earth, or of a conversation with a figure who embodies inspiration itself. The painter dreams of impossible landscapes, of color and movement that defy waking perception. The philosopher dreams of moral dilemmas, of visions that probe the limits of understanding. Upon waking, they record, reflect, and interpret, integrating insights, imagery, and emotion into their work and daily lives. Dreams have become laboratories of feeling, thought, and imagination, essential to creativity, morality, and self-understanding. Ultimately, the Romantic era elevated dreams to the status of art, philosophy, and profound human experience. They were no longer merely signs or phenomena to be explained. They were celebrated for their capacity to illuminate the self, inspire creation, and evoke the sublime. Dreams were mirrors of the human soul, laboratories of imagination, and bridges between the finite and infinite. They revealed emotion, explored morality, and offered glimpses of the ineffable, becoming central to the Romantic understanding of human life. To dream was to participate in a dialogue with the imagination, the spirit, and the universe, to explore depths unreachable by reason alone, and to encounter truths about self, society, and existence that could transform understanding and experience. In reflecting on this era, we see that the Romantics helped to shift the perception of dreams from mere curiosities or scientific puzzles into vital aspects of creativity, emotional depth, and moral and spiritual reflection. They demonstrated that dreams could be treasured for their own sake, celebrated for their intensity, and preserved as sources of insight and beauty. The Romantic fascination with dreams reminds us that while the human mind seeks understanding, it also craves wonder, mystery, and the transcendent experience that only the realm of sleep can provide. To dream is to navigate the infinite possibilities of the imagination, to confront fears and desires, to seek moral and emotional insight, and to explore the sublime landscapes of the soul itself. As the Romantic era's passion for dreams and imagination evolved into the rigid structures of the Victorian age, the world of dreams underwent yet another profound transformation. Victorian society, with its strict moral codes, industrial expansion, and fascination with science and the occult, approached dreams with both fear and reverence, viewing them as windows into the hidden recesses of the mind, as well as mirrors reflecting the anxieties, desires, and moral dilemmas of the era. Picture London in the mid-19th century, fog drifting through narrow streets, the glow of gas lamps casting long shadows across cobblestones, and the hum of industry mixing with the quiet of evening parlors where families sit by firelight. In this atmosphere of duality, public order and private obsession, reason and superstition, dreams became intensely scrutinized. They were seen as revealing more than the unconscious mind alone. There were coded messages, symbolic narratives, and even warnings from an unseen moral or psychological authority. To dream in the Victorian age was to navigate a labyrinth of personal and societal expectation, to confront both the self and the hidden forces shaping human behavior. Victorians were fascinated by the darker side of dreams, the nightmare, the vision that stirred fear, guilt, or moral panic. Nightmares were often interpreted as reflections of suppressed anxieties, fear of social transgression, repressed sexual desire, concern over mortality, or moral failure. The Victorian preoccupation with propriety and control meant that the mind's hidden impulses could emerge with dramatic intensity in sleep. A gentleman might dream of falling endlessly into darkness. A governess might be pursued by a shadowy figure, or a child might be confronted by monstrous animals or faceless strangers. These dreams were not dismissed as mere fantasies. They were carefully observed, analyzed, and discussed, treated as revealing the inner workings of the mind, moral weakness, or even divine disapproval. The Victorian fascination with the grotesque, the uncanny, and the macabre extended naturally into the realm of dreams, where the imagination could be both disciplined and unruly. reflecting the complex emotional and psychological landscape of the era. Symbolism became central to Victorian dream interpretation. Every object, animal, or event in a dream was seen as potentially loaded with meaning, and manuals on dream interpretation were widely circulated, offering elaborate guides to decoding these nocturnal visions. A snake could represent temptation, deceit, or suppressed desire. Water could signify emotion, danger, or renewal. Fire might embody passion, destruction, or spiritual purification. Dream dictionaries proliferated, translating the private imagery of sleep into socially and morally intelligible terms, allowing individuals to reconcile the unconscious with the conscious and the socially acceptable. Yet even as these symbols were codified, dreams retained an enigmatic quality, their meanings always partially elusive, reminding the dreamer of the tension between order and chaos, known and unknown, conscious control and subconscious impulse. The Victorian obsession with dreams was not purely psychological, it was deeply cultural. Literature, art, and theatre reflected and amplified dream symbolism, drawing upon nightmares and fantastical visions to explore social, moral, and existential themes. Writers such as Edgar Allan Poe, Mary Shelley, and Charlotte Brontë used dream sequences to illuminate character psychology, moral tension, and societal critique. Dreams became narrative devices that allowed authors to explore the inner lives of their characters, revealing desires, fears, and moral conflicts that could not be expressed openly in Victorian society. In Gothic literature, dreams and nightmares were not merely decorative, they were central to the narrative, shaping perception, guiding moral understanding, and evoking emotional response. A young woman might dream of a phantom figure whose shadow mirrors her suppressed fear of societal expectation, or a protagonist might encounter symbolic landscapes reflecting moral and existential dilemmas. Victorian dreams, in literature and life, were intensely moral and psychological, serving as a bridge between internal emotion and external order. Medicine and emerging psychology also turned attention to dreams. Physicians observed that sleep could be disrupted by stress, illness, or social anxiety, and that these disruptions often manifested in vivid or disturbing dreams. The study of sleep disorders, somnambulism, and nightmares became increasingly common, and doctors attempted to interpret the physiological and psychological causes of dreams, bridging the gap between moral interpretation and scientific inquiry. Sleepwalking, night terrors, and vivid dreams were examined both as medical phenomena and as windows into the psyche, reflecting an increasing recognition of the complex interplay between body, mind, and environment. Dreams, in this sense, were both signals and experiments, revealing patterns that could inform health, behavior, and social understanding. Victorians were also fascinated by prophetic dreams, haunted by the idea that the mind could glimpse the future, or that sleep might reveal hidden truths about society, morality, or destiny. Newspapers and periodicals carried accounts of dreams that seemed to predict events, from personal tragedies to national disasters, and these stories were consumed eagerly by a public fascinated by mystery and the uncanny. Dreams could inspire awe, fear, and speculation, reinforcing the sense that the unconscious was a powerful and sometimes dangerous domain. In an era preoccupied with order and predictability, the dream offered both excitement and apprehension, a space where the mind could confront possibilities beyond the reach of logic or rationality. Industrialization, urbanization, and social change intensified the Victorian preoccupation with dreams. In cities crowded with factories, smoke, and noise, sleep became a refuge, a psychological sanctuary in which the individual could retreat from the pressures of work, morality, and social expectation. Yet this refuge was rarely peaceful. The stress, guilt, and fear of modern life often manifested in nightmares, symbolic imagery, and vivid nocturnal narratives. Dreams were both escape and confrontation, offering the possibility of insight while also reflecting the pressures of contemporary life. The private interior of the bedroom became a stage for the subconscious, and every dream a performance shaped by emotion, memory, and moral imagination. Children, in particular, were seen as especially susceptible to the power of dreams and nightmares. Victorian culture emphasized the formative role of experience in moral development, and it was believed that dreams could influence character, shape ethical understanding, and reveal hidden impulses. Parents were advised to monitor dreams, encourage reflection, and helped children interpret their visions responsibly. Nightmares were treated as teaching moments, opportunities to guide the young toward virtue, courage, or self-understanding. The Victorian obsession with discipline and morality extended seamlessly into the realm of dreams, where fear and wonder were equally important teachers. Spiritualism and the occult also shaped Victorian interpretations of dreams. Seances, automatic writing, and fascination with ghosts and spirits created an atmosphere in which dreams were sometimes interpreted as channels for communication with the dead, for divine revelation, or for occult knowledge. People reported encounters with deceased relatives, visions of angels or demons, and symbolic journeys into unseen realms, blurring the lines between psychological, moral, and supernatural explanation. In this context, dreams were simultaneously personal, moral, and metaphysical, reflecting the complex interplay of faith, fear, and curiosity characteristic of Victorian society. The night became a stage for exploring the unknown, and dreams were the medium through which the mind and imagination ventured into realms both feared and revered. Consider a foggy night in Victorian London. A factory worker sleeps in a cramped, dimly lit apartment. A governess rests in a modest parlor. A young writer dreams in a cluttered attic. Each experiences visions shaped by personal anxieties, social pressures, moral reflection, and imagination. Perhaps the factory worker dreams of machines gone awry, reflecting fear of industrial labor and social vulnerability. The governess dreams of shadowy figures and moral dilemmas, reflecting societal constraints. The writer dreams of Gothic castles, phantoms, and impossible landscapes, reflecting the romantic heritage of imagination and exploration. Upon waking, dreams are recorded, analyzed, and shared, influencing creative work, moral reflection, and social conversation. Dreams remain intensely meaningful, both private and public, artistic and psychological, symbolic and instructive. The Victorian obsession with dreams and nightmares ultimately reflected the broader cultural tensions of the era: reason versus imagination, morality versus desire, social order versus individual freedom. Dreams were interpreted as both private experiences and public phenomena, bridging the inner and outer worlds, the subconscious and conscious, fear and desire, morality and imagination. They revealed anxieties, aspirations, and moral struggles, providing a lens through which the Victorian mind could explore emotion, ethics, creativity, and psychology simultaneously. In the literature, art, and scientific inquiry of the time, dreams were treated as essential tools for understanding the self and society, windows into both human emotion and social order. By examining Victorian dreams, we see a culture grappling with the pressures of modernization, moral expectation, and social hierarchy, seeking meaning in the unconscious, and exploring the symbolic, emotional, and psychological dimensions of the human mind. Nightmares became moral and psychological laboratories, revealing fears, desires, and patterns that the waking mind could analyze, interpret, and learn from. Dreams were simultaneously mysterious, instructive, and transformative, offering both insight and inspiration, terror and revelation. They bridged imagination and observation, private experience and social discourse, art and science, morality and psychology. Ultimately, the Victorian era transformed the dream into a mirror of the human soul, a symbolic language of emotion, morality, and imagination, and a tool for understanding both self and society. Dreams were no longer mere mystical messages or medical curiosities. They were arenas in which the mind grappled with fear, desire, morality, and creativity. The Victorian obsession with nightmares and symbolism reminds us that dreams have always been central to human experience, reflecting our anxieties, shaping our imagination, and revealing truths that cannot be expressed in the waking world alone. In this age of fog, gas lamps, and moral intensity, the human mind continued its age-old endeavor to seek understanding, insight, and meaning within the strange, symbolic, and often terrifying visions of the night. As the Victorian obsession with symbolism and nightmares slowly faded into the early 20th century, dreams entered a revolutionary new era, one dominated by the groundbreaking work of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, figures who transformed the understanding of the mind and laid the foundations for modern dream analysis. Imagine Vienna at the turn of the century, a city humming with intellectual fervor, crowded with writers, artists, and physicians, and the streets alive with carriages, trams, and the chatter of an evolving urban society. In this atmosphere, the human mind, long a subject of moral, artistic, and scientific curiosity, became the focus of systematic psychological investigation. Dreams, once interpreted as divine messages, moral instruction, or social commentary, were now examined as reflections of the unconscious, as expressions of desires, fears, and archetypes that shaped both individual identity and collective human experience. Freud and Jung did not merely study dreams, they elevated them to the status of keys to the hidden structure of the mind, opening doors to a world of thought, emotion, and imagination previously inaccessible to reason alone. Sigmund Freud, in particular, approached dreams as the royal road to the unconscious. He argued that dreams were deeply meaningful, encoded with symbols that could reveal repressed desires, unresolved conflicts, and the workings of the psyche beneath conscious thought. Imagine a patient reclining on Freud's famous couch in his study, the room heavy with the scent of cigars and ink, the walls lined with books, and Freud guiding the patient through recollection and interpretation. A dream of climbing a ladder, of water flooding a room, or of a stranger approaching may initially seem arbitrary, even nonsensical, but in Freud's framework, every element is a disguised expression of unconscious desire. He distinguished between the manifest content, the literal narrative of the dream, and the latent content, the hidden psychological meaning that often reflects sexual or aggressive impulses. To Freud, dreams were a window into the hidden architecture of the mind, a theater in which forbidden or unacknowledged thoughts could be safely enacted in symbolic form. Freud's method involved careful analysis, association, and interpretation. Patients were encouraged to recount every detail of their dreams, to reflect on their emotions, and to consider connections to daily life and past experiences. The dream became a text, a language of the unconscious, with its own grammar, symbolism, and logic. No detail was trivial. A color, a gesture, a word, or an object could carry significant meaning, revealing the subtle interplay of memory, desire, and repression. This approach marked a profound departure from previous methods of dream interpretation, which emphasized morality, universal symbols, or physiological cause. Freud transformed dreams into a systematic tool for psychological insight, capable of illuminating patterns of thought, behavior, and emotion that shaped the human experience at its deepest levels. Carl Jung, once a follower of Freud, expanded and diverged from Freud's theories in ways that would profoundly shape modern understanding of dreams. Jung emphasized the collective unconscious, the idea that dreams draw not only from personal experience, but also from universal archetypes and symbols shared across humanity. Imagine Jung's office in Zurich, walls adorned with paintings, masks, and symbolic artifacts, patients and colleagues discussing vivid dreams filled with mythic figures, animals, and natural landscapes. Jung observed that dreams often conveyed archetypal patterns, the shadow representing hidden aspects of the self, the anima and animus reflecting inner-gendered qualities, the wise old man or woman as a guide to moral or psychological insight. To Jung, dreams were not merely expressions of personal desire or repression. They were communications from a deeper, universal layer of the psyche, connecting individual experience to the broader human story. Dreams were bridges between the personal and collective, the conscious and unconscious, the immediate and the eternal. The work of Freud and Jung coincided with an explosion of interest in the human mind and psychology. The early 20th century saw the rise of psychoanalysis, psychotherapy, and systematic study of mental life, creating an intellectual climate in which dreams were not only objects of fascination, but also tools for understanding thought, emotion, and identity. Patients' dreams became the foundation for treatment, reflection, and self-understanding, with meticulous records kept to trace patterns, symbols, and recurring themes. Therapists explored how childhood experience, trauma, and repression manifested in dreams, and how insight into these nocturnal visions could promote healing, growth, and self-knowledge. Dreams became both mirrors and guides, reflecting the inner landscape while offering potential paths toward wholeness and integration. Freud's focus on repression and desire introduced the notion that dreams were deeply personal, often revealing conflicts the dreamer could not confront directly in waking life. Nightmares, recurring dreams, and symbolic narratives were interpreted as manifestations of forbidden impulses, unresolved tension, and emotional conflicts. A patient dreaming repeatedly of falling, drowning, or being chased might be expressing anxiety, guilt, or fear suppressed during waking hours. The dream provided a space in which these impulses could be safely expressed, transformed into symbolic language, and ultimately understood. Freud emphasized that while dreams could appear chaotic or nonsensical, they were constructed with purpose, a compromise between desire and repression, offering insight into the complex structure of the unconscious mind. Jung, by contrast, emphasized the growth and development of the psyche through dreams. While Freud focused on conflict and repression, Jung saw dreams as expressions of the whole self, offering guidance, warning, and integration. Dreams might present shadow aspects of the personality, reveal hidden potential, or provide symbolic guidance towards psychological balance. A dream of descending into darkness could signify exploration of repressed fears, while a dream of ascending a mountain could symbolize spiritual growth. Jungian dream analysis emphasized interpretation within the context of both personal experience and universal symbolism, creating a framework in which dreams were simultaneously psychological, moral, and archetypal. In this way, dreams became tools for self-discovery, moral reflection, and creative insight. The early 20th century also saw scientific and experimental approaches to dreams. Researchers began recording sleep patterns, physiological responses, and the timing of rapid eye movement, correlating these with reports of vivid dreams. Dreams were examined as phenomena with measurable components, combining psychology, neurology, and physiology. While Freud and Jung provided interpretive frameworks, scientific methods sought to understand the mechanics of dreaming itself, how memory, emotion, and neural activity produced visions in the sleeping mind. This dual approach, interpretive and empirical, marked the birth of modern dream study, situating dreams as both meaningful narratives and observable phenomena. The dream became a nexus of art, science, and psychology, a testament to the human desire to understand both mind and experience. Culturally, dreams continued to inspire art, literature, and social reflection. Surrealist artists such as Salvador and writers like Franz Kafka explored the unconscious, translating dream imagery into visual, narrative, and symbolic forms. The imagery of Freud and Jung pervaded literature, cinema, and painting, influencing how societies imagined dreams, nightmares, and the unconscious. Dreams were no longer merely personal or moral. They were collective, symbolic, and culturally resonant, shaping both individual identity and artistic expression. A dream of a fractured cityscape, a monstrous figure, or impossible architecture could reflect both the dreamer's psyche and broader cultural anxieties, illustrating how dreams bridged personal and collective experience. Even everyday life was affected by the theories of Freud and Jung. People began recording dreams in journals, sharing visions with therapists, or reflecting on symbolic imagery to understand emotional life. Dreams were discussed in conversation, interpreted for personal insight, and used to explore moral and emotional dilemmas. No longer merely mysterious or entertaining, dreams became active tools for self-reflection, moral development, and psychological growth. The modern understanding of dreams emphasized their significance, their complexity, and their capacity to reveal truths inaccessible in waking life. Dreams were now central to human inquiry, a bridge between mind and experience, between unconscious desire and conscious reflection. Consider a night in Vienna or Zurich, 1910. A young woman dreams of walking through a forest of endless mirrors. A man dreams of a towering figure urging him forward, and a child dreams of a hidden treasure beneath a dark river. Each dream is analyzed, reflected upon, and recorded. The symbolic figures, colors, and sequences are explored for connections to emotion, memory, and personal or archetypal significance. These visions are not dismissed. They are integrated into therapy, art, or personal reflection, shaping understanding and guiding insight. Dreams serve as maps of the unconscious, laboratories of emotion, and arenas for moral and creative exploration, offering both revelation and challenge to those who pay attention. Freud and Jung's work also introduced the revolutionary idea that dreams were essential for self-knowledge and psychological health. Rather than being dismissed as mere whimsy, dreams were now recognized as central to understanding motivation, morality, and emotion. Nightmares, repetitive dreams, and symbolic narratives were not only meaningful but instructive, revealing patterns of thought, behavior, and feeling that could be addressed, integrated, and transformed. Dreams became part of the ongoing project of self-realization, reflection, and personal growth, tools through which the individual could confront inner truth, integrate experience, and navigate life with greater awareness. Ultimately, the birth of modern dream analysis transformed humanity's understanding of sleep, imagination, and consciousness. Dreams evolved from divine or mystical messages into expressions of the unconscious, mirrors of desire, emotion, and archetype, and instruments of self-reflection, creativity, and psychological insight. Freud and Jung illuminated the hidden architecture of the mind, showing that dreams were both deeply personal and universally resonant, symbolic and experiential, chaotic and instructive. They transformed dreaming into a science, an art, and a moral exploration, bridging the night and day, the conscious and unconscious, the personal and collective, and creating a framework that continues to shape psychology, literature, and culture today. The work of Freud and Jung reminds us that dreams are not trivial or random. They are profound expressions of the human psyche, offering insight into memory, desire, fear, morality, and imagination. They are laboratories of the mind, stages of the unconscious, and guides to self-understanding. To dream is to enter a dialogue with the deepest aspects of the self, to confront hidden impulses, to navigate symbolic landscapes, and to explore the emotional and moral architecture of the human experience. In the modern era, dreams remain essential, bridging art, science, psychology, and philosophy, revealing both the mystery and the meaning of human consciousness. As the 20th century progressed into the modern era, dreams moved from the exclusive domain of psychoanalysts, mystics, and literary imagination into the expansive and multifaceted landscape of technology, psychology, and popular culture. Imagine the world shifting rapidly around the year 1950. Cities growing taller, radios and televisions filling homes with news and entertainment, airplanes crossing continents in hours, and laboratories filled with machines that promise to measure, quantify, and understand the human mind. In this environment, dreams, long studied as symbols, reflections of the unconscious, or mystical messages, were suddenly subject to new scrutiny, new fascination, and new forms of expression. Scientists began to record sleep with electroencephalographs, measuring brainwaves and noting the rapid eye movement that heralded vivid dreams. Psychologists developed sophisticated methods for analyzing content, patterns, and recurrence, treating dreams as both windows into the mind and measurable phenomena. Dreams were no longer only narrative experiences. They became data, processes, and objects of experimentation. The night, once the domain of mystery and imagination, became a laboratory, and the human mind became a site of both inquiry and wonder, its hidden visions slowly illuminated by technology and theory. In psychology, the work of Freud and Jung continued to resonate, but new frameworks emerged. Behaviorists initially dismissed dreams as inconsequential, byproducts of neural activity or random mental firing. Yet cognitive psychologists later approached them as valuable reflections of problem-solving, memory consolidation, and emotional processing. Sleep research revealed that dreaming occurs predominantly during REM cycles, and that the content of dreams is closely linked to memory, emotion, and daily experience. Modern theories propose that dreams were integral to mental health, helping to process trauma, consolidate learning, and integrate complex experiences. Imagine a young student in the 1970s, struggling with anxiety before an exam, dreaming of falling into a dark chasm, and then climbing to a bright, open field. This dream, while strange and symbolic, could now be interpreted as the mind working through fear, stress, and aspiration, illustrating the practical and psychological significance of dreaming in ways previously unimagined. At the same time, popular culture began to embrace dreams as both entertainment and philosophical inquiry. Films such as Alfred Hitchcock's Spellbound or David Lynch's Eraserhead used surreal imagery, nightmarish sequences, and dream logic to explore psychological states. moral tension, and aesthetic possibility. Dreams were no longer private, intimate experiences. They became public spectacles, narratives that could be shared, analyzed, and consumed. Television shows, books, and later video games incorporated dream sequences as central to storytelling, translating the peculiar logic of sleep into art, drama, and cultural commentary. Dreams became a common currency for exploring fears, desires, and imagination, bridging private experience and collective culture. People began to discuss their dreams openly, write books about recurring patterns, and reflect on the psychological and emotional implications of the visions of sleep. The dream entered daily conversation, blending entertainment, science, and personal reflection. Technology further transformed dreams by enabling their recording and analysis on unprecedented scales. Sleep laboratories were established in universities and hospitals, where patients were monitored, electrodes tracking brain activity and eye movement, recording the physiological correlates of dreaming. Researchers explored how medications, light exposure, sensory input, and environmental factors influenced dream content. Dreams became quantifiable, measurable, and analyzable, revealing correlations with memory, emotion, and neurological function. In these controlled environments, dreams were simultaneously scientific phenomena and profoundly human experiences, bridging the rigor of empirical research with the mystery of imagination. The night, once considered private and unknowable, was now a frontier for experimentation, observation, and understanding. The modern era also saw the rise of lucid dreaming, a practice in which the dreamer becomes aware of dreaming and can exert some control over the dream narrative. Techniques for inducing lucid dreams emerged, and studies confirmed their reality and potential therapeutic application. Imagine a young adult lying in bed, consciously entering a dream, flying above a city, conversing with dream figures, and confronting fears in a controlled, surreal environment. Lucid dreaming became a tool for creativity, problem-solving, therapy, and exploration, transforming dreams from passive experiences into active engagements with the subconscious. The human capacity to navigate and influence dreams extended the ancient quest for insight, prophecy, and understanding into a deliberate practice grounded in observation, intention, and psychological insight. Therapeutic applications of dream analysis also expanded dramatically. Psychologists and therapists use dreams to explore trauma, grief, anxiety, and personal growth, integrating dream work into cognitive behavioral therapy, psychodynamic therapy, and other modalities. Recurrent nightmares could be reframed, symbolic narratives analyzed, and emotional conflicts addressed through dialogue between therapist and patient. Dreams became tools for understanding the self, reconciling emotion and cognition, and exploring moral, social, and relational dynamics. The mysterious visions of sleep, once the province of mystics or philosophers, became a central instrument for psychological insight and human development, a bridge between science and personal experience. Cultural fascination with dreams also intersected with spirituality, philosophy, and art. The 1960s and 1970s saw renewed interest in Eastern philosophy, meditation, and consciousness exploration, linking dreams to altered states, inner reflection, and spiritual awakening. Artists, poets, and musicians drew upon dream imagery to create surreal landscapes, haunting melodies, and imaginative worlds. Dreams inspired literature ranging from magical realism to speculative fiction, reflecting both individual psychology and collective imagination. They became metaphors for desire, fear, morality, and creativity, bridging private experience with universal themes. The dream was simultaneously intimate and collective, personal and cultural, emotional and intellectual. Nightmares, too, continued to captivate attention. Researchers, therapists, and artists explored how dreams reflected societal anxiety, trauma, and cultural tension. Wars, social upheaval, and political instability influenced the content and frequency of distressing dreams, linking personal experience to broader historical and cultural forces. Soldiers in the world wars, for instance, reported recurring dreams of combat, pursuit, and chaos, illustrating how trauma manifests in sleep and how dreams serve as psychological processing mechanisms. Nightmares became not only psychological phenomena but social indicators, reflecting the tensions, fears, and moral dilemmas of entire generations. The rise of the internet and digital media further transformed dream culture. Online forums, social media platforms, and mobile applications allowed individuals to record, share, and analyze dreams on a global scale. People could compare symbolic imagery, discuss lucid dreaming techniques, and explore interpretations in ways unimaginable even a few decades earlier. Dreams became both a personal diary and a collective phenomenon, part of a continuous dialogue about human emotion, imagination, and experience. Technology enabled dreams to become social objects, crossing boundaries of geography, culture, and language, connecting minds through the shared language of sleep. Modern neuroscience, psychology, and artificial intelligence continue to explore dreams with unprecedented precision. Functional magnetic resonance, imaging, EEG mapping, and computational modeling allow scientists to observe brain activity during dreaming, tracing neural pathways and identifying the regions responsible for imagery, emotion, and memory. Dreams are studied not only as psychological narratives, but also as biological processes, revealing the intimate interplay between cognition, physiology, and emotion. The dream is both human and measurable, a nexus of consciousness, creativity, and neural function. Science and experience converge, creating a richer understanding of the human mind than ever before in history. Yet despite the technological, scientific, and cultural advances, the fundamental fascination with dreams remains as profound as ever. People continue to marvel at their strangeness, to explore their symbolism, and to seek guidance, inspiration, and insight in the visions of sleep. Dreams are simultaneously mysterious and explainable, subjective and universal, personal and collective, emotional and intellectual. They reflect the continuity of human curiosity, the timeless quest for understanding the mind, and the ongoing negotiation between imagination and reality, mystery and knowledge. To dream in the modern age is to participate in a centuries-long dialogue, one that stretches from ancient civilizations through the Romantic era, the Victorian obsession with symbolism, and the revolutionary work of Freud and Jung, now extended by technology, neuroscience, and global culture. Consider a night in the 21st century. A teenager dreams of flying through neon-lit cities inspired by video games and graphic novels. A parent dreams of reconciling with estranged family members. A scientist dreams of patterns that solve a persistent problem, and an artist dreams of surreal landscapes that will become a painting or a poem. Each dream is simultaneously a reflection of personal experience, a response to cultural stimuli, and a manifestation of neural processes shaped by emotion, memory, and cognition. Dreams are recorded, shared, and analyzed. They inspire, console, and challenge. They are laboratories, art, therapy, and exploration all at once, bridging human history, imagination, and modern knowledge. In the modern era, dreams exemplify the intersection of ancient curiosity and contemporary understanding. They are simultaneously psychological, physiological, cultural, and creative phenomena, connecting the private mind to shared human experience. The study of dreams today builds on millennia of observation, interpretation, and reflection, blending science, art, philosophy, and popular culture into a rich tapestry that illuminates the human mind. Dreams remind us that even in an age dominated by technology and reason, the mysteries of sleep continue to captivate, inspire, and challenge, offering insight, solace, and wonder in ways both deeply personal and universally resonant. Ultimately, dreams in the modern age reflect the continuity of human fascination. We continue to explore, record, interpret, and celebrate the visions of sleep. They are at once intimate laboratories of emotion and collective archives of imagination. They reveal the workings of memory, desire, and cognition, while also inspiring art, literature, and cultural reflection. They bridge psychology, physiology, technology, and creativity, demonstrating that the human mind remains as mysterious, vibrant, and rich as it has been throughout history. To dream today is to engage with centuries of human thought, to navigate the landscape of the unconscious, and to participate in the ongoing exploration of consciousness itself, a journey as old as humanity and as immediate as the next night's sleep. As the 21st century advanced, dreams entered an entirely new dimension of exploration, one defined by the rapid rise of digital technology, artificial intelligence, and global connectivity. Unlike any period in history, this era allows humanity not only to record and analyze dreams with scientific precision, but also to interpret them using algorithms and machine learning, creating possibilities once relegated to science fiction. Imagine a bedroom in 2025, softly illuminated by the glow of a smartphone or smart lamp sensors, embedded in the mattress recording movement, heart rate, and breathing, a subtle hum of wearable technology, capturing neural signals while the sleeper drifts into the surreal landscapes of the unconscious. Unlike the eras of Freud, Jung, or Victorian scholars, the dreamer is now connected to a digital network, capable of logging, interpreting, and even visualizing dreams with unprecedented clarity. What was once private, ephemeral, and fleeting is now observable, analyzable, and shareable, raising profound questions about the nature of human consciousness, privacy, and creativity. Dreams, in this age, are simultaneously biological events, psychological narratives, and data streams, bridging the personal and the digital, the intimate and the algorithmic. The rise of wearable technology and digital dream journals has fundamentally changed the way humans experience and interact with sleep. Devices can now track subtle physiological cues, heart rate variability, REM cycles, and eye movement, allowing precise mapping of dream states. Coupled with smartphone applications, users can record dream reports immediately upon waking, tagging emotion, symbolism, and narrative elements. These reports can be analyzed not only by human psychologists, but also by AI models trained to identify patterns, emotional signatures, and recurring themes across millions of users. Consider a young adult who dreams nightly of flying through cities of impossible architecture, of conversing with abstract figures, or of revisiting moments of past trauma. Digital tools can now map these patterns, correlate them with mood, stress levels, and behavioral data, and even suggest interpretations or meditative exercises designed to promote psychological integration. Dreams are no longer ephemeral stories. They are data points in an intricate network of human experience, revealing both individual and collective patterns. Artificial intelligence has opened possibilities for understanding dreams at a scale and precision previously unimaginable. Machine learning models can now analyze large datasets of dream reports, identifying common symbolic motifs, emotional signatures, and cognitive structures. AI can predict recurring dreams, suggest probable causes of nightmares, and even generate visual representations of dream narratives. Imagine feeding the text of a dream into an AI model that renders it into a detailed 3D scene, complete with landscapes, characters, and dynamic events, allowing the dreamer to walk through the subconscious landscape. In this era, dreams are both private experience and public simulation, combining neuroscience, psychology, and digital artistry. AI does not replace human interpretation, but amplifies it, revealing patterns and possibilities invisible to individual observation, creating a dialogue between human intuition and computational analysis. The digital age has also transformed the social and cultural dimensions of dreaming. Online communities allow individuals to share dreams with others across the globe, compare interpretations, and explore common symbolic experiences. Platforms dedicated to lucid dreaming, nightmare therapy, and dream visualization have created spaces where the personal and collective meet, where cultural archetypes emerge and circulate, and where individual creativity is validated and expanded. Dreams have become a form of social media in which imagination, emotion, and memory are shared, discussed, and collectively reflected upon. This phenomenon continues the ancient tradition of dreams as communal knowledge, but at a scale amplified by digital connectivity and modern technology, reflecting both personal and collective human experience. Medical applications of digital dream tracking and AI interpretation are transforming mental health and therapeutic practice. Clinicians can monitor patients' sleep quality, dream content, and emotional patterns over extended periods, identifying correlations between nightmares, trauma, anxiety, and depressive episodes. AI-assisted analysis can highlight recurring symbols or stressors that may be invisible to the patient or clinician alone, offering pathways for therapeutic intervention, mindfulness exercises, or cognitive behavioral techniques. Imagine a veteran experiencing recurring dreams of combat. Digital tracking allows precise recording and analysis. AI highlights thematic patterns, and therapists use these insights to guide exposure therapy or narrative reconstruction. Dreams, long a mysterious mirror of psyche, have become active instruments for healing, integrating modern technology with ancient human understanding. Lucid dreaming, previously a niche practice, has benefited enormously from digital and AI technology. Wearable devices can now detect REM sleep and signal the dreamer with gentle cues, helping them achieve awareness within the dream. Mobile applications and AI-guided exercises can train users to control dream narratives, confront fears, or explore symbolic landscapes, turning sleep into an interactive realm of creativity, problem-solving, and personal growth. A dreamer may fly over surreal landscapes, solve complex problems, or explore emotional conflicts in controlled, conscious dream scenarios. The digital age thus empowers the dreamer, transforming passive dreaming into active, intentional exploration of the subconscious mind. Dreams are no longer only observed, they are engaged with, curated, and shaped, merging human creativity with technology in ways that ancient or modern predecessors could scarcely imagine. The artistic impact of the digital age on dreaming is profound. Artists, writers, and filmmakers draw inspiration from AI-generated visualizations of dreams, merging the surreal logic of sleep with the infinite possibilities of digital rendering. Virtual reality allows dream experiences to be recreated for immersive storytelling, education, or therapy, bridging the gap between imagination and reality. Imagine walking through a VR environment that reconstructs a dream exactly as reported, complete with shifting colors, impossible perspectives, and symbolic figures that respond to the observer. Dreams become collaborative projects between human consciousness and digital technology, blending personal narrative, artistic interpretation, and computational creativity. Art, psychology, and technology converge, extending the human fascination with dreams into interactive, experiential, and visually stunning realms. Despite these technological advances, dreams remain deeply human, retaining their emotional, psychological, and symbolic significance. Digital tracking and AI analysis reveal patterns and provide interpretations, yet the subjective experience, the wonder, fear, creativity, and mystery remains uniquely personal. No algorithm can replicate the emotional depth of a dream of falling into darkness, flying over a city of impossible geometry, or conversing with a deceased loved one. The digital age enhances understanding and engagement, but does not diminish the fundamental human connection to the unconscious mind. Dreams continue to bridge emotion, memory, imagination, and cognition, now with the added lens of technology and global connectivity. The implications of AI and digital analysis extend into philosophy and ethics. As machines increasingly interpret, visualize, and even simulate dreams, questions arise. What does it mean for consciousness if our private visions can be translated into digital form? What are the ethical considerations of storing, sharing, or manipulating dream data? How does the commercialization of dream analysis, dream visualization, and lucid dreaming technology affect privacy, identity, and creativity? The digital age challenges humanity to reconcile technological possibility with personal integrity, creativity with privacy, and scientific understanding with the profound mystery of sleep. Dreams, once purely internal experiences, are now shared, visualized, and even analyzed by machines, transforming the ethical and philosophical landscape surrounding consciousness itself. Consider a night in the digital era. A teenager falls asleep, wearing a headband that tracks brain activity, dreams of an impossible cityscape, while sensors record subtle changes in heart rate and neural patterns. Upon waking, an AI application renders the dream into a 3D visualization, suggesting potential symbolic interpretations, emotional themes, and recurring motifs. The dreamer can share this visualization with a global community, receive feedback, and even plan exercises to confront fears or explore creativity in lucid dreaming practice. The dream, once fleeting and private, has become a nexus of technology, psychology, culture, and creativity, an event that is simultaneously personal, social, and computational. The night is a laboratory, the mind both explorer and mapped terrain, and sleep a stage for discovery unlike any period in human history. The digital age also facilitates comparative studies of dreams across cultures, demographics, and historical periods. Massive datasets can reveal common archetypes, cultural differences in dream symbolism, and correlations between dream content and social conditions. Researchers can track changes in dream patterns during global crises, wars, or pandemics, exploring the collective unconscious at a scale previously unimaginable. Dreams are now simultaneously individual experiences, social phenomena, and global datasets, reflecting both personal psychology and shared human concerns. Ancient obsessions with prophetic visions, moral guidance, or artistic inspiration converge with modern technology to create a new understanding of dreaming as both intimate and collective, mysterious and measurable, subjective and scientific. Yet despite the power of AI and digital technology, the essential magic of dreaming remains. Humans still marvel at the strangeness, beauty, and emotional depth of dreams. We continue to share, interpret, and explore them, now enriched by tools that amplify insight, creativity, and connection. Dreams retain their capacity to surprise, challenge, and inspire, bridging the inner and outer worlds, consciousness and culture, past and future. The digital age does not replace human experience, but enhances it, creating new possibilities for understanding, creativity, and psychological growth, while honoring the mystery that has captivated humans for millennia. Ultimately, the digital era represents a convergence of ancient curiosity and modern technology, an epoch in which dreams are simultaneously data, narrative, and human experience. Wearable sensors, AI analysis, virtual reality, and global connectivity allow unprecedented engagement with the subconscious, revealing patterns, emotions, and symbolic landscapes that were previously inaccessible. Yet, even as dreams are quantified, visualized, and simulated, they remain profoundly human, shaped by memory, desire, emotion, and imagination. The digital age does not demystify dreams entirely. It expands the possibilities for exploration, reflection, and creation, integrating science, technology, and culture into the age-old human fascination with the visions of the night. Imagine the possibilities a decade or two hence: fully immersive dream simulations, AI-guided exploration of subconscious themes, real-time lucid dreaming assistance, and cross-cultural dream databases that allow shared exploration of archetypes, fears, and aspirations. In every scenario, dreams remain central to understanding the human mind, creativity, and emotion. They are bridges between the biological and the digital, the personal and collective, the subjective and measurable. The digital age reminds us that dreams are not static. They evolve with human imagination, technology, and culture, continuing a journey that began in prehistoric rituals, ancient temples, romantic poetry, Victorian parlors, and Freudian couches. Dreams remain timeless, essential, and endlessly fascinating, revealing the depths of human consciousness in ways both intimate and universal. As we stand at the threshold of the future, it is impossible not to marvel at the journey that dreams have taken across millennia, from sacred rituals in ancient civilizations to the analytical frameworks of Freud and Jung, from Victorian moral symbolism to the digital and AI-enhanced exploration of the 21st century. The art of dream reading, long considered lost or relegated to mystical or poetic domains, is now poised for revival in ways both extraordinary and deeply human. Imagine the world 50, 100 years from now. Cities humming with invisible networks, neural interfaces, linking thought and technology, virtual realities that can recreate the landscapes of imagination, with fidelity so precise that a dream may be relived, navigated, and even shared as a collective experience. In this future, the ancient practice of interpreting, honoring, and learning from dreams will not only return, but evolve into a profound fusion of intuition, science, and imagination, reclaiming a dimension of human experience that was once considered inaccessible and intangible. Dreams will no longer be ephemeral whispers of the night. They will be portals, maps, and mirrors of consciousness, offering insight into the psyche, society, and perhaps even the cosmos itself. The potential of dreams in the future extends far beyond what technology alone can achieve. While AI and neural interfaces may map imagery, emotion, and symbolism with unprecedented precision, the human role in interpreting and engaging with dreams will remain indispensable. The future of dream reading will be a dialogue between human intuition, historical knowledge, and technological enhancement. Imagine a dreamer stepping into a virtual environment, reconstructed from a night's sleep, encountering symbolic landscapes populated with figures representing fear, desire, memory, and wisdom. The dreamer may interact with these symbols, guided by both their own subconscious understanding and digital prompts derived from centuries of dream research. In this vision, the lost art of dream reading is restored, not as a static set of rules, but as a living practice, one that integrates ancient wisdom, psychological insight, and cutting-edge technology, creating a dynamic interplay between mind, culture, and imagination. Education will transform the way we understand and engage with dreams. Schools and universities may offer courses in dream literacy, teaching students to recognize recurring symbols, interpret emotional content, and integrate dream experience into personal development. Historical dream practices, from Mesopotamian rituals to Victorian moral analysis, will inform contemporary understanding, allowing learners to appreciate the cultural, psychological, and spiritual dimensions of dreaming. Imagine students keeping digital dream journals, comparing experiences across cultures and historical periods, exploring how fear, desire, and aspiration manifest universally in the human mind. Dreams will become not only subjects of study, but tools for self-awareness, creativity, and emotional intelligence. The future will redefine education to include the exploration of consciousness itself, reclaiming the lost art of dream reading as a practical, ethical, and deeply personal skill. Therapeutic applications will also evolve dramatically. In the future, psychologists and clinicians will combine AI-assisted dream reconstruction with immersive therapy, allowing patients to relive and reinterpret dreams in controlled, supportive environments. Trauma, anxiety, and unresolved emotion will be approached through experiential dream work, with individuals guided to confront, integrate, and transform symbolic content. Nightmares may be met not with fear, but with structured interaction, allowing the dreamer to negotiate, alter, or understand threatening figures and scenarios. Dreams will become active agents of healing, guiding emotional growth, moral reflection, and personal transformation. The lost art of dream reading, once mystical and intuitive, will be restored as a scientifically grounded, emotionally potent, and ethically considered practice that empowers individuals to navigate their inner landscapes with skill and insight. Creativity and artistic exploration will flourish in tandem with dream technology. Writers, painters, filmmakers, and game designers will collaborate with dreamers and AI systems to translate the logic, imagery, and emotion of dreams into immersive narratives, interactive art, and virtual worlds. Imagine a novel that evolves from a network of dreams contributed by individuals across the globe, or a virtual experience that allows participants to inhabit the subconscious landscapes of others, exploring themes of memory, desire, and moral struggle. Dreams will inspire art not only as personal expression, but as shared, collective experience, bridging imagination, culture, and technology. The lost art of dream reading, in this context, is reimagined as a collaborative endeavor, one that merges subjective experience with objective analysis, imagination with technology, and personal insight with collective creativity. The social and cultural significance of dreams will expand in unprecedented ways. Communities may emerge around shared dream exploration, linking individuals across continents, cultures, and backgrounds. Dreams may become a common language for empathy, moral reflection, and cross-cultural understanding. Imagine a platform where users share dream experiences, symbols, and emotional themes, discovering unexpected resonances and universals that reveal both individual psychology and the shared structure of human consciousness. In this future, dream literacy is more than personal insight. It's a tool for social cohesion, cultural dialogue, and ethical reflection, restoring the communal dimension of dream reading that has existed in fragmented form throughout human history. Scientific and philosophical inquiry into dreams will continue to push boundaries. Researchers may explore the intersection of neural activity, emotion, and narrative with unprecedented precision, revealing how dreams shape cognition, morality, and creativity. Questions once considered metaphysical, such as whether dreams reflect alternate dimensions of consciousness, or how collective dreaming might manifest, may be investigated empirically, blurring the line between science and imagination. Imagine experiments in which dreams are shared in real time between individuals using neural interfaces, enabling direct exploration of consciousness as a shared experience. The lost art of dream reading will merge with empirical science, transforming mystical speculation into collaborative exploration while preserving the profound mystery and subjective richness of dreams. The future of dream reading also raises profound ethical considerations. If dreams can be shared, reconstructed, and analyzed by AI, how do we preserve privacy, agency, and authenticity? How do we honor the intimate, symbolic nature of dreams while leveraging technology for understanding, creativity, and healing? The art of interpreting dreams will demand not only psychological skill, but moral discernment, ensuring that the power to access and analyze subconscious landscapes is exercised with respect, empathy, and wisdom. The lost art, once informal and intuitive, will require training, ethical reflection, and cultural awareness, transforming it into a disciplined and socially responsible practice that balances insight with integrity. Imagine a night, 50 years from now. A child drifts into sleep, wearing a neural interface that tracks emotional and symbolic patterns. Their dream unfolds as a vivid, immersive landscape. Forests of impossible geometry, rivers reflecting past memories, figures representing fears, hopes, and aspirations. Upon waking, the dream is visualized, analyzed, and interpreted, highlighting symbolic motifs and emotional currents. The child interacts with this reconstruction, confronting fears, exploring desire, and reflecting on moral and emotional lessons. The dream becomes both experience and tool, private yet shareable, personal yet connected to a global understanding of human consciousness. Ancient practices of dream interpretation once performed by priests, mystics, or artists are reimagined in a framework of science, technology, and ethical reflection, restoring the art that humanity has pursued for millennia. In this future, the lost art of dream reading is not merely a nostalgic revival, but a profound expansion of human potential. Dreams will guide moral development, emotional understanding, creativity, and collective insight. They will become tools for empathy, teaching, therapy, and art, bridging the personal and universal, imagination and reality, mind and culture. The visions of the unconscious will once again occupy a central place in human life, not as mystical curiosities or idle speculation, but as active, integrative, and deeply human practices. The lost art is not only recovered, it is transformed, extending its relevance, impact, and beauty into new dimensions of experience. Ultimately, dreams have always been central to human understanding, from ancient rituals to Freudian analysis, from Victorian symbolism to AI-assisted exploration. In the future, this trajectory culminates in a synthesis of intuition, technology, psychology, and culture. Dreams become portals into the self and society, laboratories of emotion, imagination, and moral reflection. They provide insight into the workings of memory, desire, creativity, and cognition, while inspiring art, philosophy, and ethical contemplation. The lost art of dream reading, reimagined and restored, becomes a testament to humanity's enduring curiosity, creativity, and capacity for wonder. It reminds us that consciousness is a terrain to explore, a story to interpret, and a mystery to honor. Dreams, eternal and evolving, remain at the heart of the human journey. As this series comes to a close, consider the long lineage we have traced from Mesopotamian priests to Romantic poets, Victorian moralists to modern scientists, and now into a future shaped by AI, virtual reality, and global connectivity. The lost art of dream reading has endured, adapted, and evolved, teaching humanity to pay attention, to interpret, and to honor the visions of sleep. Perhaps the greatest lesson is that dreams are never truly lost. They are waiting, in every generation, to be rediscovered, understood, and cherished. As you drift to sleep tonight, remember that your dreams are part of this long, human continuum, a bridge between past and future, imagination and reality, self and collective consciousness. They are sacred, mysterious, and endlessly fascinating, waiting for the attentive mind to read, reflect, and learn. Before we end, if you have enjoyed exploring the lost art of dream reading across history and into the future, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories that dive deep into the mysteries of human experience. Every dream, every forgotten practice, every insight from history is waiting to be uncovered, and you can be part of that journey. Join us, stay curious, and keep exploring the unseen realms that make us human. And so, dear traveler, we have journeyed through millennia of human imagination. From ancient temples to modern laboratories, tracing the whispers of the lost art of dream reading, dreams have guided us, challenged us, and revealed the depths of our minds, connecting past, present, and future in ways both mysterious and profound. As you lay your head tonight, remember that your own dreams are part of this timeless voyage, carrying stories, symbols, and secrets waiting to be explored. Good night, traveler. Until we meet again in the realms of wonder, imagination, and the quiet magic of sleep.